radio's own show, Behind the Mic. Radio, with the switch of a dial, radio brings you tragedy, comedy, entertainment, information, education, a whole world at your command. But there are stories behind radio, stories behind your favorite programs and favorite personalities and radio people you never hear of. Stories as amusing, dramatic, and as interesting as any make-believe stories you hear on the air. And that's what we give you, the human interest, the glamour, the tragedy, the comedy, and information that are Behind the Mic. And now, presenting a man who is pinch hitting for Graham McNamee this week, one of radio's most gifted announcers, George Hicks.
Thank you, Gilbert Martin. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This afternoon, Behind the Mic brings you the story behind orchestra leader Enoch Light's disappearance from the airwaves. Amusing mistakes made by your favorite announcers, how an advertising agency builds a program for a prospective sponsor. We give you the sound effect of the week. We salute a program you loved, the Don Amazo program that featured violinist Godfrey Ludlow. We answer letters from listeners, and finally, in celebration of his 10th anniversary on the air, we bring you from Hollywood the one and only Jack Benny being interviewed by Don Wilson. Last year, one of the fastest rising orchestra leaders in radio was a young man named Enoch Light. He was on the air 4 or 5 times a week from the Taft Hotel and had numerous commercial programs. Then, suddenly, he dropped completely out of sight for months. As a matter of fact, from June of last year to January of this. But here's Enoch Light to tell you all about it. Enoch, suppose you tell us what happened to you.
Well, George, last year I went on a road tour with my band. And we played at the University of Michigan prom, the Carnegie Tech dance, a couple of dates in Boston, and then we went up to Old Orchard, Maine to open up the pier. It was a very successful opening, I might say. After the job, I was driving back to Boston with a couple of my musicians. It was 4 a.m. on the morning of June 2nd, a Sunday morning. We were traveling along the Newburyport Turnpike. We topped the crest of a hill. I remember we were talking about Old Orchard.
That was a great opening, Enoch.
Yes, it was. They seemed to like us all right. I hope we do as well on our next date. As a matter of fact...
Hey, what's this guy trying to do? He's on the wrong side of the road.
Pull over to the other side.
I am.
Look out, he's going to hit us.
I had tried to pull over to the side of the road, George, but they caught us head on. The driver of the other car was killed immediately, and the man with him was badly injured. One of the boys with me had a broken leg and nose, and the other musician was thrown out of the car and had his jaw broken.
How about you, Enoch?
Well, the motor was pushed right into my lap. I had a hip, 1 arm, 6 ribs, my jaw and nose all broken, and my head was cracked open. My face was also badly cut. When I was hit, I was knocked out. I regained consciousness about 4:30 a.m., shortly after the accident.
This fellow looks to be in pretty bad way.
Say, what happened?
Well, you were in an accident, buddy.
Yeah? I remember. How are the other fellas?
Well, they've been taken to the hospital in private cars. We're waiting for an ambulance to take you there.
Oh.
Oh, just take it easy, Buzzy. Just lie still.
I felt that I was going to die. I wasn't afraid, just kind of curious. They took me to the Anna Jakes Hospital in Newburyport. I was given an antitetanus injection, and they removed 36 pieces of glass from my face and body. I was semi-conscious for about 2 weeks. The doctors didn't think I was going to live, but I fooled them. I was in the hospital for months. Eventually, they moved me to my home in Danbury, Connecticut. It took me to January of this year to completely recover.
How about your band?
Well, of course, it broke up. They were all good men, and they all found jobs within 2 weeks after my accident. When I felt okay, I started putting a band together again. 6 of the old boys, including Art Lombardi and Fowler Hayes, who'd been in the accident with me, came back and formed a nucleus. I added 5 others. We've been playing various college dances and weekend dates. And now I'm just waiting till I get the right spot with a radio wire.
You feel you can get right back there all over again, huh?
Yes, I do, George. I think that 3 or 4 more weeks on the road, and then a spot with a radio wire will put me over further than I was before.
That accident was a terrible experience, Enoch.
Yes, George, it was pretty bad. But it's a funny thing. That experience has helped me.
How?
Well, I always worried a lot. Too much, I guess. But when I was in that hospital, I saw so many people who really had things to worry about. Injuries and all kinds of sickness. And I myself was so near death that by comparison, all the worries I have about work and success seem so small and unimportant. Besides, I feel that if I could come through such an experience as I did and be all right today, that everything's going to be all right from now on. I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna, George. I really mean it.
Well, Enoch, you're making a grand comeback, and to prove it, Song Hits Magazine has just awarded your band a plaque as the Orchestra of the Month. And here's wishing you the best of luck. You deserve it.
Thank you, George.
Oddities in Radio, offering odd, little, true, behind-the-mic stories that help make radio sometimes amusing, sometimes exasperating, but always interesting to the people in it. This week's Oddity. Every once in a while, we present fluff, beards as they're sometimes called, or amusing mistakes that favorite radio personalities make on the air. Announcer Ben Grauer was on his very first appearance in radio and was quite proud of himself because he was doing very well. He was announcing a program which featured a talk by Mrs. Carrie Chapman Catt, well-known suffragette. The new announcer was supposed to say at the finish, "Thank you, Mrs. Catt. We are deeply grateful." What he said was,
"Thank you, Mrs. Catt. We are dopely grateful."
George Putnam, well-known NBC announcer, made a very rare boner only recently when he said,
"This is the National Broadcasting Company."
You're a broadcasting company on the waters, and it'll come back to you as a fluff. An announcer at the World's Fair introducing Grover Whalen said,
"You will next hear the voice of Grover Cleveland."
But this week's prize is taken by Dick Dudley, Master of Ceremonies, who conducts NBC's program Who's Blue, and who finished his program by saying,
"Listen next week for another dripping grandma."
For examples of some of the best of the fluffs we've featured, see the article on Behind the Mic in this week's Liberty magazine. A few weeks ago, Behind the Mic showed how a program was originated and prepared for sale to a network for use as a sustaining feature. Well, this afternoon we're going to show you how an advertising agency originates and prepares a program for sale to a prospective sponsor. Here's a man who can tell you all about that. A member of the radio department of one of the biggest advertising agencies, J. Sterling Getchell. Our guest is Stuart Ludlam. Well, Stu, how does an advertising agency go about preparing a program for a prospective client?
Suppose we take an actual experience of an agency preparing such a program. Last summer, it was for a bread account. Let's call it White Flour Bread. That wasn't the name, but it'll do. We'll change the name of the program, too, but the actual details are accurate.
Well, what's the first thing you do to prepare a program?
This was a campaign to extend from July through September, when bread sales are at their height. You see, strangely enough, it has been found best by advertisers to plug their products most when their sales are highest, so the people will buy their products instead of someone else's. After all, every sponsored radio program has a prime purpose, and that's to sell the product advertised. Now, the first thing to do in figuring out a radio program is to find out from the client what are the problems to be met in selling his product. We discovered that since this was a bread, the program couldn't cover the entire country. We had to concentrate our efforts where the client had his bakeries and distributed his bread.
That's right. Why advertise in places where people can't buy your product?
So we decided to buy time on individual stations, mostly stations connected with the large networks. Various executives and myself got together to discuss where we'd go from there.
Well, fellas, the problem now is what sort of audience are we going to try to appeal to?
Well, how about a kid show? Kids eat a lot of bread, and they're very loyal to the programs they like.
You must remember, Pete, this is a summer program, and the time for a kids' program is generally between 5 and 7. We'll have daylight saving time, and the kids will be out playing. So you're not going to reach your audience. If you have a kids' program after 7 o'clock, and the whole family's home, they'll probably want to listen to something else.
Well, how about a program for the whole family?
The cities in which we have to advertise white flour bread are so scattered we can't buy a network show. We'll have to put it on by records, transcriptions.
Yeah, sure.
If we do a show for the whole family, we'll have too much heavy competition from the big network shows, which are also built for the whole family. We're competing with shows like Benny's.
Well, I think the person to appeal to is the one who buys the bread.
Yes, the woman of the house.
You mean we should present a daytime serial? Maybe you're right.
Well, was that what you offered the client?
No, we didn't, George. You see, one of the men in the advertising agency traveled from city to city, actually rode the bakery delivery trucks, and called on the grocers. When he came back from his trip, he had additional information that changed our plans.
One of the most important things I found out on my trip was how important it is to get bread placed on the top of the bread rack in grocery stores.
Why?
Well, I watch the women buy, and they almost invariably reach for the bread on the top of the rack. They feel it, and if it's fresh, then they buy it. I think that it's important that we try to get the grocers to put our bread on the top of the bread rack.
Oh, could a program help to do that?
Yes, it could, if we'll try to have a program that reaches not only the women, but the grocers as well.
How can we do that, Stu?
For one thing, I don't think we can use the daytime serial as we planned, because they primarily appeal to women. Do most grocers have radios in their stores, Joe?
Yes, practically every one of them has, and they're generally tuned into news or music programs.
Well, then, I think we should present a musical program that will appeal to both the women and the grocers. And the best time to put it on the air would be either in the morning or in the early afternoon, when the women listen. We'll go on every day, and we'll tell the truck drivers to tune the grocer's radio to our station when he makes his daily deliveries.
If we din the name of white flour bread into the grocer's ear long enough, he might put our bread on top of the rack and might even recommend it.
Well, Stewart, have you any musical program in mind?
I've been investigating as many possible programs as I could. I think I've got something here that'll fit the picture, especially since we haven't too much money to spend. And this will be inexpensive.
What is it?
There's a fellow who has a program of dance records. He's on a small station. He introduces the recordings and comments on them. Although he's on a small station, he's so popular and such a good salesman that he generally draws more listeners to his station than the big ones with whom he's in competition. Now, if he can do that, I think he's the right program for us.
Sounds like a good idea.
Let's get busy on it right away.
And then, George, we, and by we I mean the head of the agency, the account executive, and the whole radio department, presented this program to our prospective client. We gave him the reasons why we thought it would be good for him, and we sold him the program for presentation on the air. It did a darn good job, too, as we believed it would.
Thank you, Stuart Ludlam, for that interesting information and for giving what is undoubtedly, for the first time on the air, a legitimate picture of how an advertising agency goes about presenting a program to a prospective sponsor. The sound effect of the week. From time to time, Behind the Mic presents some unusual sound effects. Every once in a while, on various programs, there's a sequence involving an air raid. We're going to show you the difference between how an air raid actually sounds and how it's done for radio. This is how an air raid sounds when made for a radio program. This is done by playing 3 records on 3 different turntables. One record is a recording of a flight of bombers in formation. Another record presents the sound of airplanes zooming and diving. The third record is a series of explosions. Not actual bombing during a raid, but sounds made at Army proving grounds and consisting mostly of artillery fire. Once again, the sound of an air raid as done on radio programs. Now, the following record was made during an actual air raid. Well, some difference. But here's one case where the genuine doesn't seem half as real as the synthetic. We in radio believe that radio has a tradition of which it can well be proud. A tradition of good programs that linger fondly in your memory. And so each week we bring you a star or a part of a program you used to hear, a program you loved. Among the programs you loved in the 1920s was Don Amazo. Don Amazo was a Spanish violinist, the part created by Godfrey Ludlow. Don Amazo's interpreter was played by the late Colonel C.T. Davis, also well known to listeners of those days as Old Man Donaldson. Don Amazo's stories were written by Colonel Davis and Malcolm LaPrade. The interpreter related incidents from the life of Don Amazo, who would illustrate these stories with melodies played on his beloved Stradivarius. And now, let's turn back to the year 1926, a long time ago in radio, for a brief memory of a program you loved, Don Amazo.
I have often told you of Don Amazo's boyhood days in the old city of Granada, and how he used to slip away from home to visit the gypsies of the Albertine Hills. The gypsies liked young Don Amazo and taught him to play many of their old tribal melodies. Don Amazo has suggested that I tell you of his first experience in buying a donkey from the gypsies, just in case there happens to be a gypsy camp in your own neighborhood. Now, this particular donkey belonged to the king of the gypsies, and His Majesty assured Don Amazo that the animal was unique in all the world. It could read. Well, Don Amazo saved his money for months, and at last the bargain was concluded. He hurried home with his donkey and placed a book instead of a bunch of carrots before the astonished animal. Not a brain, not even a snort. Don Amazo hurried back to the Gypsy King. See here, you've lied to me. This donkey can't read a word. I held a book before his eyes, and he said nothing. Of course not, said the Gypsy King. But you told me he could read. Oh, that he can, said the gypsy. But I forgot to tell you, the donkey cannot talk. But after all, it didn't matter, says Don Amazo. I had to have some good excuse for going to the Gypsy King's hut, and buying a donkey served very well. The real reason Don Amazo went so often to the Albertine Hills, well, I think a pair of flashing black eyes and lips like rosebuds, but that's another story. Perhaps Don Amazo will permit me to tell it to you someday. And now Donna Mazel asks me to say, Buenas noches, amigos. Good night, my friend.
Thank you, Godfrey Ludlow. It's a real pleasure to hear Esquilita played again as only you can play it. That Donna Mazo was a program. And many thanks to Malcolm LeProd, co-author of Donna Mazo, who supplied us with the material you heard. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for a really big moment. May 9th marks the 10th year of regular appearances on the air for a comedian who is unique in the history of radio, Jack Benny. As a matter of fact, Jack will be honored on this anniversary at a gala banquet this Friday night. I had the honor and pleasure of being the announcer on Jack's first commercially sponsored program. And our orchestra leader, Ernie Watson, was saxophonist in George Olson's orchestra, which appeared with Jack on that show. And that's why we think it's particularly fitting that Behind the Mic helped Jack celebrate his anniversary. Now, after a 15-second interval to make the switch, we take you to Hollywood, California, where Don Wilson will interview the one and only Jack Benny.
Thank you, George Hicks, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As George has already told you, Jack Benny will be honored on his 10th anniversary in radio at the gala banquet this coming Friday night, May 9th, at the Biltmore Bowl of the Biltmore Hotel here in Los Angeles.
Gee, I'm nervous already.
Since Jack is one of the very few radio stars who can point to such a record of achievement, it is only fitting that he should appear on today's broadcast of Behind the Mic. Both Jack and I have just left rehearsal for today's Jell-O program, and while the cast continues across the hall, we've come over here to this little studio to take part in Behind the Mic for a few moments so that Jack can answer some questions about his career in radio, and I'll try to put myself in the role of a typical Jack Benny fan. First, Jack, here's a question that especially fits the occasion. Supposing we go back 10 years and have you tell us about your very first appearance on radio. What was it like, and was it a sponsored show or on the cuff like this one?
Well, Don, I went on the radio for the first time early in 1932 when Ed Sullivan, the Broadway columnist, invited me to make a guest appearance on his program in New York.
Do you remember what you said?
No. Oh, yes. I'll never forget it. Look what it got me into.
Well, let's hear about it.
All right, I'll give it to you. Now, just to illustrate how times change, particularly in radio, it was a little monologue affair where I walked to the microphone and said, ladies and gentlemen, this is Jack Benny talking. There will be a slight pause while you say, who cares? Now, that was funny then, Don. It may not sound funny now, but they screamed at it then. Anyway, I went on. I said, I am here tonight as a scenario writer. There's quite a lot of money in writing scenarios for pictures. Well, there would be if I could sell one. Even that. They even laughed at that then. Anyway, I'm going back to pictures in about 10 weeks. I'm going to be in a new film with Greta Garbo. They sent me the story last week, and it's a very novel idea. When the picture opens, I'm found dead in the bathroom. I hear? Now, they screamed at that, Don. Imagine 10 years ago. Anyway, I was found dead in the bathroom. I say it's a sort of a mystery show. I'm found in a bathtub on a Wednesday night. I should have been in Miss Garbo's last picture, but they gave the part to Robert Montgomery. You know, politics. The funny part of it is I'm really younger than Montgomery. That is, I'm younger than Montgomery and Ward. You'd really like Garbo. She and I were great friends in Hollywood. She used to let me drive her car around town. Of course, she paid me for it. Well, that was it, Don. That's what I said when I first went on the air. That was my first crack at radio.
Well, Jack, if you don't mind my saying so, it sounds a bit like a vaudeville routine.
That's true, Don. Don't forget that radio was unknown to me then, and I didn't know whether it was good material or not. I could judge only by stage standards, particularly vaudeville, where I had gained most of my experience.
What was the reaction to your first broadcast, Jack?
Nobody liked it but me. However, on the strength of it, I landed my first radio commercial just 2 weeks later.
Well, I don't blame you for saving the script as a souvenir. But tell me, Jack, when did Mary Livingston start her heckling career on the air with you?
Oh, she's been in my hair since June of 1932. But she did all right by herself before that in vaudeville.
When was that?
Well, about 12 years ago in New York. And it all happened because the girl who ordinarily worked with me became ill just before the show one night. Mary volunteered to substitute, and she's been working at it ever since.
I think that our listeners would like to hear something about the other members of the cast. Jack, take Rochester, for instance. How long has he been with you?
Well, Rochester started with the program back in 1937 when he won an audition over 50 other contenders for the role of a Pullman porter. Just a bit part that we had written in for one broadcast only.
But it didn't work out that way.
That's right. He was so good that we kept him on for another week, then another, until he finally became a regular member of the cast.
Well, Jack, I'm often asked about the preparation of your program. How long does it take on the average?
Well, we never stop working. The schedule is something like this. After a Sunday night broadcast, I get together with Bill Morrow and Ed Boulogne, my writers, and we hand over different ideas for next week. Then we meet early Monday morning and start working. That goes on throughout the week until our first rehearsal, generally held either Friday or Saturday, then rewriting Saturday night and Sunday morning for the actual broadcast.
You know, Jack, when Mort Lewis asked me to interview you today, he made a specific request that I inquire about your fan mail. He'd like to know about some of the odd and unusual letters that you receive each week.
Well, they are odd and unusual. Honest, Don, you should have my tinfoil troubles.
Tinfoil troubles? Now, what does that mean?
Well, you remember the program early this season when I talked about my collection of tinfoil?
Yes.
Well, ever since that time, Don, I've received letters by the hundreds containing bits of tinfoil to be added to my collection. Believe me, I must have gotten at least 30 pounds of it. And that doesn't count the letters asking me to give the tinfoil to various charities.
Well, Jack, no interview with you would be complete without a few words about your classic feud with Fred Allen. Now, did Allen make the first crack at you or vice versa?
Well, naturally, Don, he started it. I wouldn't say anything nasty. Well, here's what happened, Don. A few years ago, when Allen had amateurs on his program, a little 9-year-old kid named Stuart Kennan played the B on his violin. And when he got through, Allen made a crack that Jack Benny couldn't do that. He ought to be ashamed of himself. Naturally, I was wounded. So I let my nails grow and clawed back. And as many times I've given him a good scratching, I have yet to strike blood. Anyway, Don, that's how it started.
That has been going on ever since.
Yes, sir.
Well, Jack, we're just about through now, and as it's your anniversary, of course, you get the last word.
All right, Don. I just want to thank Mort Lewis for the invitation to appear on today's broadcast for Behind the Mic.
That goes for me, too, Jack. We now take you back to New York.
Thank you, Jack Benny and Don Wilson. May you both have many more radio anniversaries. Next week on Behind the Mic, you'll hear the story of how the National Broadcasting Company gets its foreign news by shortwave, as told by the head of NBC's listening post, Jules Van Item. We salute another program you loved, and we bring you more of the comedy and the tragedy and the glamour that are Behind the Mic. This is George Hicks saying good afternoon.
Behind the Mic is composed, or rather written by Mort Lewis. The original music is composed and conducted by Ernie Watson. This is the Blue Network of the National Broadcasting Company.
Radio's own show, Behind the Mic. radio. With a switch of your dial, radio brings you tragedy, comedy, entertainment, information, education, a whole world at your command. But there are stories behind radio. Stories behind your favorite programs and favorite personalities and radio people you never hear of. Stories as amusing, dramatic, and as interesting as any make-believe stories you hear on the air. And that's what we give you. The human interest, the glamour, the tragedy, the comedy, and information that are behind the mic. Whose name has been a symbol of the best in radio since the beginning of broadcasting, Graham McNamee.
Thank you, Gilbert Martin, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience. This afternoon, Behind the Mic brings you true, amusing stories about radio from the collection of A.L. Simon, a radio columnist. The sound effect of the week, a human interest story behind a broadcast of Alma Kitchell. More amusing fluffs or mistakes made by your favorite announcers. We salute a program you love, one that starred songstress Sylvia Fruce. We answer letters from listeners, and finally, you will hear what happens when a daytime serial needs fixing up, as told by scriptwriter and consultant Bill Rapp, editor of True Story magazine. There are other people besides those connected with the production of Behind the Mic who make collections of amusing stories behind radio. For instance, there is Al Simon, conductor of the radio column Twisting the Dials, which is syndicated throughout the country, and radio instructor at Long Island University. He's going to bring you some of these stories. And now, Al Simon. Al, how long have you been collecting stories behind radio?
Since about 1937, Graham, when I wrote letters to practically all the stations in the country and asked them to send me stories, particularly amusing stories behind radio.
What are you collecting them for?
Eventually, in collaboration with Ben Hall. I want to make a book out of these stories and call it Fun on the Air.
Well, suppose we dramatize a few of these true behind-the-mic stories that have been sent to you, Al, huh?
That's what we're here for, Graham.
Go ahead.
To start off, one day the harried girl at the information telephone at KFI, KECA Los Angeles heard.
Madam, I've got a little bet you can settle. I'd like to know where KFI gets the correct time.
From Western Union.
Where does Western Union get the correct time?
From the U.S. Naval Observatory in Arlington.
Where does the Naval Observatory get it?
From the stars.
Where do the stars get it?
From the KFI time signals.
Oh.
That was one of my favorites. Here's another one, Graham. This story concerns Arthur Godfrey, radio commentator. A couple of years ago, a beer concern in Washington, D.C. decided that radio would help their sales pick up in hot weather. They acquired time on Godfrey's Sundial program and sat back to view the results. About 3 weeks later, Godfrey received the following telegram.
You're good. Your program is better. Our beer sales are even better than that. We can't fill any more orders. You're fired.
Here's another one from my collection, Graham. Eddie O'Shea, the sound effects man at WTIC Hartford, once fired a shot during one of the popular mystery dramas broadcast over that station. The shot was supposed to have killed the villain instantly. A moment later, O'Shea tripped over a wire and accidentally fired the revolver a second time. This could have ruined the drama, but the actor at the mic thought quickly and said,
"Boy, has this place got an echo." That's all right, Al. How about another one?
Well, a couple of years ago, out in Butte, Montana, there was a show called Barnum Was Right, which featured dramatizations from San Francisco's police records. After a brief opening theme and announcement, a voice would say,
"There's a fool born every minute, and a chiseler to take him."
At station KGIR one night, the program preceding Barnum Was Right ran overtime, and the announcer had to rush through a long local announcement advertising bargains at a local store.
This is one of the greatest sales that Smith's Bargain Basement has ever run. You'll get such bargains as genuine full-fashion silk hose at 36 cents a pair, aluminum pants for 17 cents, hand-cut glassware at a new low price, and other equally good bargains. And now for Barnum Was Right.
There's a fool born every minute, and a chiseler to take him.
But one of my real favorites concerns a nervous speaker on a Chicago station who picked up his speech with the last page first and started his talk right off.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, good night. I wonder if you can sit down in those aluminum pants. Well, anyway, good afternoon to you, Al Simon, and thanks for those amusing stories. We hope to have you back on this program a few weeks from now with a lot more of them. The sound effect of the week. From time to time, Behind the Mic presents some unusual sound effect which was used on the air and tells exactly how it was done. This week, we again answer requests of our radio audience to explain certain common sound effects. One correspondent asked us how the sound of somebody walking up and down stairs is made. The sound is this. It is made by our sound man simply walking up and down 7 or 8 steps of a miniature stairway, especially constructed for this purpose. Another listener asks how a baby cry is made. Well, a baby cry is made by one of 2 ways. Either by having an expert crier weep into the mic and flood the studio with tears like this. Or simply by playing a phonograph record of a bawling infant. Several months ago, we showed how this same record, played at slow speed, is also used for the sound of a man having a bad case of pink snakes, we'll call it. The same record played at slow speed. And finally, we received a request from one bloodthirsty fan who wanted to know how the sound of a person being beheaded by the guillotine is created. This is done by using a series of pulleys. Attached to one end of the rope, which runs through these pulleys, is a weight, which is released as the pulley is raised and falls with, we hope, a sickening thud, which makes the sound of raising the guillotine knife and dropping it. To make the sound of the head falling, after a deadly silence, you drop into the basket a Persian melon for the head of an aristocrat, for a proletarian a cantaloupe, and for the hoi polloi a squash. Now, this time, a sustaining program, we'll drop a grapefruit. The sound of a man having his head bobbed. A few weeks ago, we had as a guest Alma Kitchell, conductor of Alma Kitchell's Briefcase and Alma Kitchell's Streamline Journal. She brought us a most absorbing human interest story, and since then I've learned that she knows many others. So here's Alma with another story of what radio meant to one listener. Alma Kitchell. Come in, Alma.
Graham, as you know, or perhaps you don't, the theme of one of these programs of mine is what radio means to its listeners.
Of course I do. I listen every day.
Thanks. After one broadcast, I received such a human, touching letter from a widow. She told me that she'd been having considerable trouble with her son. She was worried. For instance, at night, after supper, she'd say to him,
Bob, where are you going now?
I'm going out with the gang.
I wish you'd find some new friends. I don't like those boys, especially that Bart boy. He's a bad one.
Oh, Hank Bart's all right.
No, he isn't. It was only by the skin of his teeth that he wasn't sent to reform school last year for breaking into Rousseau's grocery store. I wish you'd stay home in the evening once in a while, Bob.
What is there to keep me home here?
Well, she wrote me further that Bob had been in a little trouble in school also. The principal had asked her to come to see him.
Unless your son changes his ways, I'm sure he'll end up in the reform school.
Yes, but what can I do?
Well, for one thing, he ought to develop some new interest. Something that will take him away from the group of boys that are now his companions. Those kids are pretty bad youngsters.
I know. He's out with them every night when he's supposed to do his homework. He just won't stay at home.
Well, there ought to be some way of making him stay home. Have you a radio?
No.
Why don't you get one? A small one. You know, the radio might not only keep him home listening to it, but it may help to develop some new interest.
She wrote me that she did buy a radio, and her son started listening to music, and being a youngster, particularly to dance bands. Very soon he developed such an interest in music that he wanted to get into the school band. But of course he couldn't play because his mother couldn't afford a musical instrument for him. The principal again came to the rescue and got him the loan of an old trumpet. The lad was thrilled and practiced diligently. Well, to make a long story short, Graham, he not only became one of the star performers of the high school band, but on graduation he formed his own dance orchestra. And who knows, someday he may be one of the big leaders. And there's a youngster who might have wound up in a reform school.
Well, Alma, that's another swell example of the way in which radio influenced its listeners for the better. And thank you for another grand story, Alma Kitchell. Oddities in Radio. offering odd little true behind-the-mic stories that help make radio sometimes amusing, sometimes exasperating, but always interesting to the people in it. This week's Oddity, we once more present some fluffs and amusing mistakes made by your favorite announcers. Most of these fluffs have been supplied by Al Simon from his collection. Announcer Sheb Martino, giving a time signal on station WDZ in Tuscola, Illinois, once said,
The correct time is 10 of 10. No, I mean 10 after 10. No, well, anyway, it's somewhere around 10 o'clock.
An announcer on a New York station said,
Tonight, fair and cooler, followed by tomorrow and Saturday.
On station WMBO, Auburn, a new announcer introducing a soprano soloist said,
And now we hear Miss Gilbert singing her interpretation of that beautiful old Jewish ballad, Makushla.
On station KDKA, announcer Bill Sutherland introducing a very large, stout soprano made this slip.
Our singer is well known in musical circuses.
And Ted Husing once came out with this one.
Here come some government dignitaries, all of them high.
Finally, an announcer at WMBO doing a time signal said,
The time will be 2:30 p.m. at the sound of the musical goat.
We in radio believe that radio has a tradition of which it can well be proud. A tradition of good programs that linger fondly in our memory. So each week, we bring you a star or a part of a program you used to hear, a program you love. This afternoon, Behind the Mic salutes a young lady who has long been a radio favorite and is not only every bit as good as ever, but maybe just a little bit better. Our guest is Sylvia Fruce. Sylvia, what are you going to sing?
Do I worry, Graham?
If you do, you're crazy.
Perhaps you wonder how I feel about your sudden change. I thought at last that this was real, but since you're acting strangely, do I worry 'cause you're stepping out? Do I worry 'cause you've got me in doubt? Though your kisses aren't right, do I give a bag of beans? Do I stay home every night and read my magazine? Am I frantic 'cause we've lost the spark? Is there panic when it starts turning dark? And when evening shadows creep, do I lose any sleep over you? Do I worry? You can bet your life I do. Do I worry 'cause you're stepping out? Do I worry? You got me in doubt. Though your kisses aren't right, do I give a bag of beans? Do I stay home every night and read my magazine? Am I frantic 'cause we've lost the spark? Is there panic when it starts turning dark? When evening shadows creep, do I lose any sleep over you? Do I worry? You can bet your life I do.
Yes, Sylvia, I think it's even a little bit better. Gal, how you can put a song over. Thank you. Letters from listeners. Each week we invite the listeners of Behind the Mic to write us questions about radio, and almost every week the questions we consider to be of most general interest we have answered on the air. This afternoon's questions will be answered by Behind the Mic in the person of our announcer, Gilbert Martin.
Thank you, Graham.
Ann Sims out on Yukon Wilcox asks, are there any women directors in radio?
Yes, Graham, there are a few women directors in radio, and several weeks ago we had one of them as a guest on this very show. Although there aren't many such gals, they are all very competent. And believe me, they have to be, as the competition with the male sex in this field is terrific.
Philip M. Lewis of New York City writes in to ask this question. I am told that a number of comedians have dress rehearsals before audiences to test out their gags. And yet some of them, the gags, not the comedians, die during the actual program. If the gags have been tested, why is this so?
Well, no two audiences are alike, and jokes which get laughs from one group of people will not always evoke laughter from another. Now, there are other reasons why jokes do not get laughs besides their not being funny. For instance, during the telling of a joke, somebody walks across the stage and takes the studio audience attention from the comedian, which, of course, will kill a gag.
Ralph Vogel of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania writes, when a program preceding yours runs into your time, as happened a few weeks ago when Winston Churchill was speaking, how do you make sure your program will come out on the dot, as yours did? After all, you didn't know how long Churchill was going to speak, and he occupied 6 or 7 minutes of the time allotted to behind the mic.
Well, in the case of Mr. Churchill, it's true we didn't know how long he was going to speak, but we had the program so timed that we knew by taking out one portion of it, we'd save 5 minutes. By taking out another portion, 10 minutes, and so on. We didn't know until the moment we went on the air exactly how long our program would have to be, and as prearranged, we cut to make up the lost time. And I might say this is the usual procedure in such situations.
Ralph Adams of Collinsville, Connecticut, requests this information for a friend. Does John J. Anthony, conductor of the Goodwill Hour, answer programs by mail, and how does one address letters to him?
Mr. Anthony informs us that he does not attempt to give solution to personal problems by mail. Letters sent to him should be addressed to John J. Anthony in care of the station through which he is heard, and the mail will be forwarded.
Jan Hart of Newark, New Jersey, wants to know if your orchestra leader, Ernie Watson himself over there, is the same man who composed that novel music for the old Popeye program.
And that answer is yes. Ernie not only composed the Popeye music, but he has composed and arranged for such orchestra leaders and orchestras as Paul Whiteman, the Philadelphia Symphony, Rubinoff, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey, and at present is composing for various NBC orchestras and programs.
Ralph Adams of, Ruth Starr, not Ralph Adams, of Beaumont, Texas, wants to know what happened to Schlepperman of the Jack Benny program.
Well, Schlepperman, whose real name is Sam Hearn, appears intermittently as a guest on various radio programs. A few weeks ago, he was a guest on the Good News program, and he also makes numerous vaudeville appearances.
And that's the news. Thank you, Gilbert Martin. Daytime serials play a mighty important part in radio, and there are very vital writing problems in these shows. Problems that arise when the script goes stale and listeners start to fall away. In such a case, a story consultant is often called in to advise on how to fix the script. Here is one of the best of these story consultants to tell you all about it. Besides being a radio consultant, he is editor of True Story magazine. Bill Rapp. Hello, Bill. Mike's yours. Take it away.
Thanks, Graham. But I want to say here at the beginning that a story consultant not only is called in when a script goes stale, but is sometimes called in at the start of a serial to help the author plot the story.
Well, what does a good daytime serial have to have, Bill?
A sponsor.
Oh, you're a dreamer, Bill, but aren't we all?
But seriously, a good story for a long serial must have at least 2 of these 3 fundamentals. A socially significant central theme, a group of characters who naturally generate dramatic situation after dramatic situation, and a hopeful attitude to this business of living.
When do you do most of your work, Bill?
During story conferences.
What are these story conferences like?
Well, Graham, suppose we show the audience a typical story conference designed to help out a sick script. And so that our audience can get them all straight, let's first introduce the people at the conference.
Well, I'm Martha. I write the script. It's always been successful until now.
I'm Pete, the advertising manager of the sponsor. Personally, I think the trouble with this script is that it's too highbrow.
I'm Joe. I represent the advertising agency. I'm what they call an account executive. Boy, oh boy, I hope that just because our show has lost a little popularity, the client doesn't change to another advertising agency.
I'm the story consultant, but I won't come in till later.
I'm the director of the show. I should be at the conference, but I'm not. I'm homesick, which cuts out another actor and keeps the budget of this program down.
And now, a typical story conference in an office of an advertising agency. And don't think it's exaggerated.
You never go to script in your life, and if you come in here
Just
and
look
tell
at
me
that
how to write
Crosley.
script,
Just take a look at that Crosley now. Look at it. Down 2 points since the last rating. And every point means millions less listeners. And why is the rating down? Why, I ask you?
Why, Pete? Because we killed Sherman Talbot.
Of
That's
course.
why.
Certainly. Look at the mail we received. This one says, why did you kill Sherman Talbot? He was such a fine man. He had a lovely character. We all like him, and now you've killed him. We'll never buy your product again, and we used to eat it all the time at our home.
Isn't that awful?
Yeah, and here's another one, too, Joe. Look.
Yeah?
It was a disgrace to kill Sherman Talbot. I resent it personally. Not only will I not eat toasted shreddies,
But I belong to the Four Deuces Bridge Club and to the Ladies' Auxiliary, and I'll see that none of the members eat toasted shreddies either.
You're right, Pete, you're right. I guess we shouldn't have killed Sherman Talbot.
Well, I'm glad we've agreed on that at least. But who killed Sherman Talbot?
Who killed him? Why,
Yes,
you know...
It was your idea, Pete. You told us your wife didn't like Sherman Talbot.
Well, she didn't.
And none of her friends liked Sherman Talbot. And that I should get rid of him once and for all. So I had to have him shot.
Yeah, well, I still think I'm right.
Yes.
But if you'd written it right, you didn't dumb it up enough. That was the trouble.
You're the first person who hasn't been satisfied with my writing. I've written radio for 10 years, and my scripts have always been successful.
Yeah? Then why don't you write a successful script for us? Show's going down, our product isn't selling.
Well, maybe your product isn't any good. Have you ever thought of that? Well,
Now, look, Martha, do you realize what you're saying?
The product
I
is
do.
good. Now, look here. I'll have you know that we sold more toasted shreddies last
Where
year.
is that guy, Raft? We're paying him to come in here and help us lick this problem. He can't even be here on time.
Bill.
Yeah, that's right. Where's Rap?
I don't know. We should...
Bob.
Oh, hello, Bill.
Sorry I'm late.
Well, Bill, we've got a real problem here.
I'll have you know that toasted shreddies last year, Martha, we sold more
You're
packets-
absolutely
said
right.
that
You're
before.
absolutely right. It's a great product. But how about it, Bill? Are you ready to help us?
Well, I spent 12 hours last night listening to records of the rise of young Dr. Pepper O'Randolph. I must have heard about 40 or 50 episodes.
Yes, well?
Yeah. Do you know what's wrong with it?
Yes.
Good. What?
You killed Sherman Talbot too soon.
Too soon. I didn't think he should have been killed at all.
Well, my wife doesn't like him, and she
Oh,
knows
I
her
knew that
radio.
before.
Yes, Pete, probably a lot of people didn't like Sherman Talbot. But a lot more people seemed to like him.
You're right.
This Talbot was a rather nice guy before you decided to get rid of him, wasn't he, Martha?
Sure, that's the way I built his character.
And you got rid of him in about 5 weeks. That is, you changed his character and made him a heel and motivated his death all within that time.
Right.
It was done much too fast.
What do you mean, Bill?
Well, you know that many of your daytime radio serial listeners don't listen every day.
Yeah.
And a lot of them remember Sherman Talbot as being a good guy.
Right.
They didn't know that he'd become a villain because they didn't hear some of the shows in which his character was changed.
Gotta listen.
So when they heard that he'd been shot, they were sorry for him. If you would have spread his becoming a heel out over 13 weeks, you would have given your listeners a chance to find out that he was a rat.
That's right, it's there.
Those letters you got are from women who still remembered him as being a good guy.
You're right, absolutely right. Well, what can we do now, Bill? What's the way out?
Radio reincarnation. He's got to be brought back.
What do you mean?
I had him shot, but definitely. We had him found kissing another man's wife, and the husband shot him. He's been buried.
Well, listen, can we dig him up?
Hey, that's a constructive suggestion, Pete. Dig him up.
Say,
That's right.
I wonder if a man could be buried and then be... Wait a minute. Maybe a cataleptic fit.
Well, wait, I'll find out in a second.
Well,
I'll phone my doctor. No, I'll phone my doctor.
Well, all right.
All right, phone the
Hello?
doctor.
Hello, give me a line, please.
You know, I've heard of cases like that.
Well, hold on a second. This fellow will know.
Sounds believable.
Hold on.
I hope he gets this guy in.
Hello? Hello, Ernie? Yeah, this is Pete. Say, Ernie, can a guy be buried in a cataleptic state and be brought back to life? How long ago was he buried? A month ago. No, I don't know him. It's a script. Yeah, he was killed. Oh, thanks. Thanks very much. Now, goodbye.
What does he say?
Now, if he was buried, he was embalmed, and nobody can survive that.
Not even on daytime radio.
Oh, I never thought of embalming, sure.
Look, I figured this out.
Yeah?
The script intimated that Talbot didn't get along with his mother-in-law.
Yeah. Right.
He believed that she was interfering in his married life.
He was.
So let's give him a double and make the double the guy who was shot.
Double?
This sort of thing happens frequently. Men sent to jail, for instance, because they look like the real criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Now Talbot was away from home when he sees his picture printed in the papers with the startling news that he's dead. That gives him an idea.
Yeah.
His mother-in-law has been ruining his whole life. So he decided that this was a great break.
Uh-huh.
Instead of going home, he goes to Atlantic City.
That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
but listen, how are we going to get him back in the story, Bill?
Well, one day a friend comes to the house and asks how Sherman is.
Yeah.
The wife says, Sherman? Don't you know Sherman's dead?
Sure, he's dead.
He died a month ago. And the friend says, well, I must have seen a ghost then in Atlantic City only 2 weeks ago because I met him there and we talked. And it was Sherman, all right.
I get the idea.
So they call the Missing Persons Bureau of the Police Department in Atlantic City. A call goes out and Sherman Talbot is located.
Sounds good to me. He doesn't want to come home on account of the mother-in-law situation.
Right. So they put a personal ad in the newspapers. And he finally answers and says that he'll come home, but no mother-in-law.
Yes, but what are we going to do with the mother-in-law?
Why not kill her?
Oh, yes. We could. She could be hit by a taxi or have a heart
No,
attack.
listen,
or...
wait, you can't kill the mother-in-law.
Why not? Everybody hates her.
Yes, but you can't kill the mother-in-law.
And why not?
Because think how many people who buy our product are mothers-in-law.
Oh,
That's easy to fix.
Oh, yeah, how?
Let's not forget the third of our fundamentals, a hopeful attitude to life.
there you are.
So instead of killing the mother-in-law, we'll reform her, but in 13 weeks.
Reform a mother-in-law in 13 weeks? Don't you think that's too fast?
Now, let's don't go into
That
that.
is typical of an actual story conference.
Thank you, Bill Rapp, for supplying that information, for giving us a fine technical story, and for appearing yourself. Thanks, Bill. The reason you're hearing this music is
is that the show ran a little shorter than dress rehearsal, and rather than slow up the pace of our spot about daytime serials, we decided to fill in with music. On Behind the Mic, you will learn how songstress Alice Cornett almost lost a sponsor because she lost her southern accent. We salute a program you love that starred orchestra leader and instrumentalist Frank Novak. You will learn how mystery scripts are written. And we bring you more of the comedy, the tragedy, and the glamour that are behind the mic. This is Graham McNamee speaking. Good afternoon, all.
Behind the Mic is written by Mort Lewis. Original music composed and conducted by Ernie Watson. This is the Blue Network of the National Broadcasting Company.
Radio's own show, Behind the Mic. Radio, with a switch of a dial, radio brings you tragedy, comedy, entertainment, information, education, a whole world at your command. But there are stories behind radio, stories behind your favorite programs and favorite personalities, radio people you never heard of, stories as amusing, dramatic, and interesting as any make-believe stories you hear on the air. And that's what we give you, the human interest, the glamour, the tragedy, the comedy, and information that are behind the mic. And now presenting a man whose name has been a symbol of the best in radio since the beginning of broadcasting, Graham McNamee.
Thank you, George Putnam, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience. This week, Behind the Mic shows you how a radio production firm sells a program to a sponsor. You will hear the sound effect of the week, how radio commercials are written, a thrilling story behind a March of Time broadcast. And we salute a program you love, Lazy Dan. We answer letters from listeners. And finally, we bring you a story behind an Austrian freedom station, as told by Rudolph, the man who ran it. A few weeks ago, we showed on Behind the Mic how an advertising agency prepares a program for possible sale to a client. But programs are not only originated by advertising agencies or radio stations. They are very often created by independent radio production firms. And so now we're going to show how a radio production firm tries to sell an original program to a prospective sponsor. Here's a man who can tell us all about it. Bill Koblenzer, sales manager of the radio production firm of Wolf Associates. Bill, what is a radio production firm?
It's an organization that primarily originates programs and sells them to sponsors, or tries to. And tries is more like it most of the time. Then we either direct and cast it ourselves or hand it over to the agency and take a commission.
Well, you don't try to sell a program directly to the sponsor, do you, Bill?
Well, mostly we work through the advertising agencies.
Well, Bill, your firm produces many shows. For instance, the O'Neills, Happy Birthday on NBC. So you ought to be able to tell us how is a show sold to a sponsor.
Well, Graham, suppose we show how it's done in a little dramatization. It's a hypothetical case, but the details have all happened in selling programs.
Okay, Bill, take it away.
Our scene opens in the office of our producer, who we'll call by the fictitious name of Joe Clark. He's in conference with a couple of salesmen who work for his firm.
All right, now, fellas, bear with me 1 minute. Look, I have something to say. No, wait. Look, fellas, I think this famous minstrel show is something that should be sold. It's got a novel idea. It gives people famous in fields other than entertainment a chance to take their hair down in a minstrel show. Now, we got names, famous politicians, famous writers, famous artists, all people who can entertain, play a banjo or sing or something.
Yeah, good thing.
They'll all take part in this famous minstrel show, see? I think the show has everything.
Yeah, I do too, Joe. It's got names and entertainment. It's good, particularly right now, too, when people want to laugh.
Sure. Now, here's the printed presentation for you fellas to take around and show your clients. This book has all the arguments in it to convince advertising agencies that it's a good show. Tells how much the show will cost and why it'll cost. Everything's here, the orchestra, comedians, writers, all itemized so that the agency can get a clear picture. And I've had 25 copies of this book set up, and we're going to show them around to the heads of the radio departments of all the advertising agencies.
Look, Joe, I've got an idea.
Yeah?
Now, instead of taking this book around ourselves, since it's a minstrel show, let's hire some postal telegraph messengers to black up and take this presentation around and announce when they come into an office.
Next day, in the office of the heads of the radio department of 25 different advertising agencies, this scene is enacted.
Mr. Revere, there's a postal telegraph messenger outside who wants to see you personally, sir. He's all blacked up.
All blacked up? Send them in. Well, I'll be doggone.
This presentation tells about a new radio program, y'all.
Well, a presentation of a new radio program. Here, let me look at this. Well, I'll be doggone.
The next step is for Joe and his salesman to start getting in touch with the heads of the radio departments to whom they present the program.
Oh, Jack, I wanted to see about this new show of ours.
Well, Joe, I've been looking over the presentation, and it seems interesting, but frankly, we haven't a client who could use this type of show. Right now, we're looking for a good daytime serial, but I'll keep it in mind in case we can use it.
Joe, we have a client who's in the market for a show, but he hasn't got much money to spend. What's the cost of that show again? You can do it for $2,500, exclusive of the radio time cost. Well, my client can only spend $1,500. Could you do it for that? Tom, I possibly might, but I wouldn't. Why not? Well, because the show couldn't be done right. We'd have to cut down on the cast and the quality of the program. Wouldn't get the audience it could if it was done for $2,500. And after it was on the air for a little while, you'd be dissatisfied with it, and you'd blame me. I'd lose a good contact and a good friend, too. No, Tom, I guess I'll just take it elsewhere.
We have a client, Joe, that might go for it. This thing looks good on paper, but, well, I'd like to hear it. Will you record an audition?
Sure, if you're interested enough in it.
Well, I submitted the show to the account executive, and he thinks the client will go for it.
Swell.
So Joe invests anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 in paying for his cast, his orchestra, his writer, his director, his engineer, his sound effects man, and his recording. Then they record the show. He takes it back to the advertising agency, and the recording of famous minstrels is played. And then...
Well, how do you like it, Frank?
Oh, we like it fine, Joe. Everybody in the office thought it was swell.
When are you going to sign the contract?
Well, Joe, you see, the client went to a nightclub last night, and he heard some new orchestra and singer, and he likes them so well, he's going to buy them for the show.
Mm-hmm.
They're good, all right. They're going to go places. But I think your show would be better, but he's doing the buying.
Okay, Frank, we'll try someplace else.
And the audition record makes the rounds. Months go by, and then one day...
Tell you what we're going to do, Joe. We've got a tobacco account that's set to go on the air, time bought and everything, but they haven't a show. Now, our client is going to get 2,500 of his employees, men, because the show's to appeal to men, and he's going to audition 4 different shows before these men.
Mm-hmm.
Yours is one of them, and we'll play the record you made. The show that gets most of the votes is the one he's going to buy. Is that okay with you?
Why not? I have nothing to lose, and we've got a good show.
After the audition is over...
Attention, everybody. We've just tabulated the votes. 80% of the votes have been cast for famous minstrels, and that's the show we're going to buy to sell our product.
I think that's a good bet.
Phew, thank heavens we've sold it at last.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a composite picture of how a radio program is sold by a production agency.
And thank you, Bill Koblenzer, for supplying the information which made this spot possible. The sound effect of the week. From time to time, Behind the Mic presents some unusual sound effect which was used on the air and tells exactly how it was done. On the Colonel Stoopnagle Stump Club program this past week, which is sponsored by a beer company, during the commercial, the Colonel was supposed to open a bottle of beer. A comedy sound effect was used. The Colonel opening the bottle of beer sounded like this.
Sounds more like a beer krieg to me. Well, this catastrophe was produced first by a couple of fruit tills being smashed. Then an explosion record played while 2 panes of glass were crashed, and then the explosion was faded down and a record of a waterfall was played. Once more, Colonel Stoopnagel opens a bottle of beer. Pays and pays. The woman?
No, the sponsor.
You said it, kid. He's the bird that really makes radio possible. Yes, those little commercial announcements plugging the product certainly are important in this business. They're so important that this afternoon we've invited the head radio commercial writer of one of the biggest advertising agencies, Young and Rubicam, to tell us all about Old Man Commercial. Our guest is Joseph Moran. Joe, everyone knows that the idea of a good commercial is to create a desire in the listener to buy the product you're advertising.
Well, Graham, you sound like you've been in radio before.
Well, I'm going to try to make a career of it sometime, Joe. But anyway, what does a sponsor look for in his commercials?
Well, Graham, one of the most important things to him is sponsor identification. By that I mean that the listener should not only remember the program and the star, but also the sponsor's product. The little thing which, after all, makes the whole show possible.
Well, suppose a commercial is really good. What percentage of the listeners do remember the sponsor?
Oh, anywhere from 50 to 95 or 98%.
What program has the highest sponsor identification?
In our shop, Graham, the Jack Benny Show.
Why do people remember the product, which I think is some dessert or other in Jack's case?
Well, the name of the product is often mentioned as many as 40 times throughout the show.
40 times, Joe?
Mm-hmm. Remember, the program starts right off with Don Wilson announcing the sponsor's product program. Then a quartet singing J-E-L-L, the sponsor's product. Jack starts off by saying sorry, the sponsor's product again, everybody.
And yet it never becomes obnoxious. I suppose that's because you sort of kid the product.
Oh, no, Graham, we never do that, even though it may seem like it. The actors are kidded, but the product, never.
Well, what must a good commercial have, Joe?
Well, it should be long enough to sell the product, and it must hold the listener's interest while it's doing it. Generally speaking, it should have one central theme and put over one point or related points, because, obviously, it's easier to remember one thing than a whole lot of them. Putting over the sales story with conviction depends greatly on the announcer. Now, our commercials are written in the style of the one who's going to announce them. We don't write them for just any Tom, Dick, or Harry Von Zell.
Which do you consider better, the dramatized commercial or the straight-talk commercial?
Well, that depends on the product, Graham. If it's an old, established product, and everybody knows practically everything about it, and it's a case of telling the same story over again, then usually a dramatized or device commercial is much better. But if you've got something new, for instance, let's say some new vitamin has been added to the product, then you've got real news. And a straight commercial should hold the interest.
Well, how do you determine whether a commercial should be serious or comic?
Well, that again depends on the product and the program. Take Benny's show. The product is a light, appetizing dessert. It's universal in appeal, so we want it to reach everybody. So the commercial is in keeping with the dessert. It's frankly lightly written in a staccato manner, and the straight commercial is backed by music. On the other hand, we have the Silver Theater, in which the products are silver plate and sterling silver. Well, since buying silver is naturally a more serious problem to the average listener than spending a few cents for dessert, our overall approach is more serious. We try to give the commercials the same aura of glamour and tradition that makes the silver desirable. Commercials are more gracious and smooth.
So, when you mentioned vitamins before, I hope you don't mean to infer that your silver now is full of vitamins.
Well, thanks for the idea, Graham. We'll think it over.
Well, Joe, how much commercial announcement do the networks permit you to have?
Well, on NBC, on nighttime network shows, 3 minutes, a half hour. For a daytime network show, 3 minutes and 15 seconds for 15-minute programs, and 4 minutes and 30 seconds for half-hour programs. Oh, roughly it averages about 10% of the show time for commercials.
Joe, there's one question that I'm sure has puzzled a lot of listeners. Why do sponsors break up their programs, some of them very interesting dramas, with a commercial right smack in the middle of the show?
Well, Graham, that goes back to your problem of sponsor identification. By surveys, it's been found that more people are listening to the program in the middle than at any other time, and naturally, you want to get your sales message across to the greatest listening audience.
Well, Joe, before you go, there's just one more little question that still puzzles me.
What is it, Graham?
Who really sponsors Jack Benny?
Rochester.
Oh! Here's a true story of the intense drama that goes on behind the mic. This ironic tale actually happened. Many of you remember the March of Time, the daily dramas of news events. Each day, the staff got together to dramatize the news events as they came off the wire. And one day, the 3rd of September in 1935...
Hey, Joe, if we only had a human interest spot, we'd have a swell show for tonight.
Here's something that just came in from Philadelphia.
Yeah, what's it about?
The flash here says actor dies of heart failure on opening night of new show. That's all we have, Charlie, except that it's Lenore Ulrich's show.
Gee, poor fella. Suppose he couldn't stand the excitement. Get me the details, will you? We'll dramatize.
Okay, Charlie. I'll call Philly, and maybe Equity here has some dope.
Right. Jack?
Yes, Charlie?
Look, let's get hold of a cast for this thing.
Okay.
I need somebody to imitate Lenore Ulrich. Agnes Moorehead ought to be able to do that. Ask her.
Yeah, I'll get her.
And for the actor, let me see, we get...
How about that actor who was anxious to break into radio and kept phoning for appointments?
Which?
You liked his audition. Remember the long interview you gave him?
Oh, yes, sure, of course. Say, is he still coming in every day?
No, he hasn't been in for a while. I guess he's becoming discouraged after so many months of no job.
Well, I'm sorry, but we've never had a chance for him. Get him now. His name is Bart or something.
Yeah, William Bart. I'll get his phone number.
Thanks. Hey, Joe, you got the dope on the Ulrich spot yet?
Yeah, here it is. Play is called Portuguese Gal. It opened last night in Philly. The part calls for the man playing Lenore Ulrich's husband to come in at the head of a flight of stairs. Well, last night he came on, wobbled a bit, and then collapsed over the banister. Doctors say he was so excited getting his great chance at last, his heart wouldn't stand the strain.
Ooh, poor guy. Suppose he just about gave his life to get a chance to act.
Charlie, here you are. Here's the phone number of William Bart.
William Bart?
Yeah, William Bart. We're going to give him a chance. He should be able to imitate the actor perfectly.
But the man who dropped dead last night was William Bart.
We in radio believe that radio has a tradition of which it can well be proud. A tradition of good programs that linger fondly in our memory. And so each week, we bring you a star or a part of a program you used to hear, a program you loved. And this afternoon, behind the mic, salutes Lazy Dan, whose real name is Irving Kaufman. Lazy Dan was on the air weekly from 1933 to 1937. Irving Kaufman portrayed the comic misadventures of a colored porter working in a hardware store, as well as all the other characters in the script. And here's a bit from Lazy Dan. As the scene opens, we're in Jones' hardware store, and we find Jim Jones talking to Lazy Dan.
Well, Dan, are you and the boys ready for the minstrel show?
Yes, Mr. Jim, I is, but the rest of the boys ain't here yet. Well, look at who... Here he is. Here's Mr. Flanagan now. Hello there, Mr. Flanagan.
Well, the top of the morning to you, boys, and how are you?
Yeah, glad to see you. Yeah, and right behind him is Mr. Coon. Hello there, Mr. Coon. Well, cheerio, my friends. Cheerio and a pip-pip. Yeah, pip-pip to you, too. And here's Mr. Raviola. Hello, Mr. Raviola.
You betcha my life it's a raviola. How do you feel, kids, huh?
Yeah, glad to see you. Well, doggone, look at who's right beside him. Charlie the laundryman. Hello there, Charlie. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth.
All right, boys. Now, Dan, suppose you get the boys ready and rehearse that number we're doing for the minstrel show. Now, I'll start the first chorus myself, and then you boys can help out. Is that okay?
Yes, Mr. Jones. Go ahead, you start it, and we'll help out.
There are blues that you get from worry, and there are blues that you get from pain, and there are blues when you're lonely for your one and only, the blues you can never... Take it, Dan.
Yes, I got it. There are blues that you get from long and brrr, but the bluest blues that one can see. I saw the blues that on my mind, they're the very meanest kind. The blues my naughty sweetie give to me.
Well, Dan, that's all right, but what about your friends? Aren't they going to sing?
Yes, they're going to sing. Come on, boys, get in front of this microscope, and when I call you out, don't forget to come in. Are y'all ready now? Well, here we go. There are blues that you get from sweetie when she phones to another guy. Take it, Mr. Flanagan.
And there are blues when your honey spins on. Take it, Mr. Cohn.
And blues when she's telling you a diddy bam 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 bam. There are blues that you get when married. Take it, Mr. Raviola.
Hey, look, boss, they got a blues. When you gonna be free? Take it, Charlie.
Songatia mango ya tango ya lango, singao mio tongo mangao, soy tongai. Get out the way and let me finish. But the kind of blues that's good and blue come from buying wine for two. The kind of blues my sweetie give to me. Now get out the way and listen. The kind of blues my sweetie give to me.
Well, Lazy Dan, Irving, what are you doing today?
What am I doing today, Graham? Well, I've got a program of my own on another network. And I'm doing a lot of songs and commercial announcements.
What's the best-known commercial song you're doing?
The one that ends up with,
I'm nuts about the good old USA.
So are all of us, Irving. I mean Lazy Dan. No, I don't. I mean Irving Kaufman. Letters from listeners. Juliet Vogel of New York asked this question. While listening to the radio late in the morning, I heard a number of short and long beeps. It sounded like code, but I'm familiar with code, and I know it wasn't. Can you tell me what these sounds were?
You are probably hearing facsimile broadcasting. In facsimile broadcasting, printed words and pictures are sent through the air and they are reproduced at home. To receive this type of service, you must have a special facsimile receiving unit.
Al Tolleries of Chicago asks, has Billy Mills, the orchestra leader, been in radio any length of time?
Well, just to give you an idea, on June 17th, he will complete his 10,000th broadcast when he conducts the orchestra for Fibber McGee and Molly. Incidentally, he remains as band leader for the summer show, replacing Fibber McGee and Molly, the program which will star Ransom Sherman.
Spencer Alexander of Washington, D.C. asks, who sponsors the radio program The World Is Yours?
The World Is Yours is an unsponsored educational program produced by NBC under the auspices of the Smithsonian Institution. It celebrates its 5th anniversary on the air next week.
Sylvia Shore of Miami, Florida, asks, will the sponsor of the Eddie Cantor show stay on the air in the summer?
Yes, the sponsor will fill Cantor's place with a quiz show, which is not as yet titled. Announcement will be made very soon.
Thank you, George Putnam. Thank you. As you know, in many countries in Europe, the people are only permitted to hear what their government wishes them to hear through government-controlled radio stations. And yet within these countries, or near their borders, are courageous men and women who, opposing the government, broadcast at the risk of their lives the truth as they see it to their fellow men. Today we have as a guest a young man who is in charge of one of these freedom stations. He is known by the name of Rudolph, and here he is. Rudolph, will you tell us how these freedom stations originated?
Well, Graham, the first freedom station was established by Otto Strasser. Otto Strasser was one of the first of the Nazis. In 1932, Strasser revolted against the Nazi policies and fled the country. He established the first freedom station in Czechoslovakia.
What is the purpose of such a freedom station, Rudolph?
First, to give information to the people, to bring them news which they can't get within their own country, and to show them what is really going on in the world, particularly the way that democracies regard their way of living and their policies. This information is most important because it undermines the faith of the people in their leader and in their cause. These stations urge resistance and sabotage inside the country. They appeal to the women to form an inner front, pointing out how useless it is to sacrifice their husbands and sons, and urges them to make peace with the world.
What happened to this first Freedom Station?
It was headed by a young man named Ernest Formis, who was a member of the Strasse Black Front, which was the anti-Nazi party. As I said, it broadcast from inside Czechoslovakia. It got more and more listeners inside Germany. Finally, the Nazis sent a 22-year-old girl to Czechoslovakia, and Formis fell in love with her. She made an appointment with him in a forest, and when he arrived there, instead of the girl, he found 2 Nazi agents who shot him and fled over the border.
The station continued?
Oh, yes. Many freedom stations were inside Germany. They began to use mobile transmitters in automobiles so that it would be more difficult to locate them.
What was the penalty if you were found operating one of these stations, Rudolph?
Death, of course.
Where did you operate your station?
When England and France entered the war, they immediately set up freedom stations. I headed the Austrian freedom station in Normandy. We were on the air 2 hours daily.
What did you broadcast?
Well, for one thing, we broadcast cultural subjects that were forbidden within the Reich. For instance, a broadcast would be something like this.
You have just heard the Lorelei. Isn't it a pity that such a beautiful poem, such a good German poem, had to be written by Heinrich Heine, and that you cannot hear it except through a station like ours? And now we are going to play a work of the good German composer, the Midsummer Night's Dream Overture by Felix Mendelssohn, and following this you will hear the music from Lohengrin, conducted by Arturo Toscanini, the greatest of all conductors. What a shame that he no longer conducts at Bayreuth and Salzburg.
Well, then what else would you do, Rudolph?
Well, besides that, we would give news. We'd make jokes at the expense of the political party in power, because we have always found that ridicule is a strong weapon.
Did you have a large audience?
We didn't need 1 gram. If a few people heard us, they would whisper it to their friends, and in that way, what we said would spread like wildfire throughout the country.
Well, didn't the Germans try to stop your station from functioning?
Oh, yes. They would try to jam our station.
What do you mean by jamming?
They would operate 6 stations on the same wavelength as ours and play very loud records so that anybody listening to our station would hear a confusion of those jamming records instead of hearing us.
What did you do to counteract that?
Several things. We would change our wavelength every day, and the jamming stations would have to follow us up and down the wavelength to find out where we were and change their wavelength to suit. They would only jam when we were speaking, because jamming is a very expensive process. So what we did to beat that was to play a record and then fade the record down in the middle and talk, and thus catch the Nazis unaware. By the time they started jamming, we'd finish talking, and we would just play music again.
And how did they catch people who were listening to your station?
Well, let's say somebody was listening to us.
Contrary to what you people hear, the morale of the English is being improved as a result of the bombing of London. The English people are becoming more and more aroused, and although there have been a large number of casualties, there are more than ever before.
Ernst, what is that music?
I don't know any more than you do.
The Gestapo.
So, listening to a freedom station. You're both under arrest.
How was this done, Rudolph?
Well, the Germans would set up mobile stations in automobiles. These stations were on the same wavelength as the freedom station. They would play loud records as they drove through the streets. If you were listening to a freedom station and the mobile transmitter playing loud records would pass your door, your radio would pick up their broadcast and blare. Following this mobile transmitter was another car full of Gestapo, the secret police. They'd trace the blare, and you'd be under arrest and in a concentration camp.
Well, are these freedom stations still being operated, Rudolph?
Yes, from England and from within the occupied countries themselves.
Well, now, tell me, what are you doing in the United States now, Rudolph?
I'm lecturing, and I've taken out my first citizenship papers, and I'm becoming an American citizen. A citizen of a country that needs no freedom station. Because here, Graham, you can hear the truth.
Right. And that was mighty well said, Rudolph, and very informative. Thank you very much, Rudolph. Next week, Behind the Mic, we'll show you how the broadcast by which the English children in America speak to their parents is set up. You will hear a story behind South American radio. We salute an artist you love, famous cellist Yasha Bunchak. And you will hear more of the tragedy, the comedy, and the glamour that are found behind the mic. This is Graham McNamee speaking. Good afternoon, all.
Behind the Mic is written by Mort Lewis. Original music composed by Ernie Watson. Conducted by Norman Cloutier. This is the Blue Network of the National Broadcasting Company. Radio's own show, Behind the Mic.
This afternoon, Behind the Mic pays tribute to a great news organization, the Associated Press, whose news coverage, along with that of the other news associations and of the listening posts of the various broadcasting companies, makes it possible for radio listeners and newspaper readers to know what is going on throughout the world. Since its very formation, the men who reported the news for this great organization have been interwoven into the history of America and later of the world itself. It is this history, the history that the Associated Press has recorded, we bring you this afternoon. The dramatizations are based on the book, AP, The Story of News, by Oliver Gremling, Assistant General Manager of Press Association, Incorporated, a subsidiary of the Associated Press. And now presenting Gilbert Martin, pinch hitting for Graham McNamee.
Thank you, Bob Stanton, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 10 men representing the 6 most important New York newspapers sat around a table in the office of the Sun one day early in May 1848. They had been in session for more than an hour, and all that time in stubborn argument. They were the autocrats of the city's newspaper world, and one room never before had been big enough to hold them. David Hale of the Journal of Commerce was speaking.
Gentlemen, as I have said, Mr. Bennett and I have asked you to form an association with us, each contributing his share to a general fund, which could be used in a concerted effort to provide readers with wider coverage of all important world events. Now, if we pool our resources, we will all get more news, and more accurate news than we could singly. Mr. Bennett and I, having pooled the news of our 2 papers, the Journal of Commerce and the Herald, are already getting wider coverage than you gentlemen singly.
And you've set up an organization so costly you want to bamboozle us into paying the bill. That's the real story behind this.
Now, you've said that before, Mr. Webb, but it isn't true. There's only one telegraph wire to supply all of us. Our papers have to take 15-minute turns on the facilities. And all but the first in line are out of luck. Now look, how much better would it be if we were all members of one association and received this news all at the same time? Then there wouldn't be this constant backstabbing to get the news a few minutes ahead of the other man. But gentlemen, I have an even more important reason for urging you all to pool your resources.
What is it, Mr. Hale?
Well, Mr. Greeley, it's this. Some of the telegraph companies are toying with the idea of setting up regular subsidiary organizations of their own to cover and transmit the news for sale. Now, with no government supervision, these companies could make it impossible for any news but their own to move on their wires. Why, they'll simply refuse to carry our news. Yes, but if we pool our resources, we can offer such attractive prices to the telegraph companies, they will find it unprofitable to set up their own news-gathering agencies. Now, look, gentlemen, what are we going to do?
I'm for it.
Well,
Mr. Hale?
Yes?
I think we have decided. We're with you.
Good.
What shall we call our organization?
Well, gentlemen, how about the Associated Press?
And from this meeting of rival newspaper owners who had been at Sword's Point was to grow the great news-gathering organization that was to fairly blanket the earth, the Associated Press, whose news sets presses roaring. The 1848 presidential election was one of the first major assignments undertaken by the Associated Press. Public interest centered on the Whig National Convention at Philadelphia, where 4 men were in the running for the party's nomination: General Zachary Taylor, General Winfield Scott, Henry Clay, and Judge McLean. The New York terminus of the telegraph line was still in Jersey City. The problem of bridging the wide river baffled the wire company, and Dr. Alexander Jones of the Associated Press intended to get the convention news across the Hudson from Jersey to New York as fast as possible.
Now, look here, Johnny. I'm going to be in Jersey City.
Yeah?
I'll get the convention news by telegraph from Philadelphia. Now, you go down to the pier.
You mean near the Cortlandt Street ferry, sir?
That's the one. And watch the New Jersey side.
Right.
Now, I have a flagpole set up. If I run up a white flag, that means General Taylor was nominated.
Taylor, yeah.
A red flag means Clay. If you see 2 white flags on the same staff, that means General Scott.
Scott?
And if 2 red flags, Judge McLean.
McLean, yeah, I got it.
As soon as you see the signal, I want you to race off to the office so that the New York members of our association can be notified. You understand?
Yes, sir, sure.
Now remember, a white flag, General Taylor. A red flag means Henry Clay.
40 minutes after Jones had crossed the river,
A white flag! It's General Taylor! General Taylor! General Taylor! General Taylor is nominated!
while over in Jersey City, Dr. Jones still waited patiently.
They certainly seem to be taking their time making that nomination.
Well, they're still arguing. Probably won't get to it till tomorrow morning.
The signal the boy had seen was the white flag of a broker's representative in New Jersey wigwagging the latest stock quotation to a lookout in New York. But fortunately for the Associated Press, General Taylor was nominated the next day. Early in 1861, a sad-faced man stood on a train platform at Springfield, Illinois. He looked down at the faces of a group of friends gathered to bid him goodbye as he left for Washington. Among those in that small group was Henry Villard, Associated Press correspondent. As the train pulled out, Villard, who was traveling on it, approached the sad-faced man in his private coach.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Villard?
I'm sorry to say, sir, but the speech you just made caught me completely unprepared. I was unable to take down more than a few words of it. Almost anything you say now, sir, is of special interest to the nation at large, and I know that the people of this country would like to know what you said.
Well, that's very easily fixed. Have you a pad and pencil?
Yes, Mr. Lincoln. Here you are, sir.
Thank you. I'll write down what I said for you. My friends, no one, not in my position, can appreciate the sadness I feel at this parting. To this people, I owe all that I am. Here I have lived more than a quarter of a century. Here, my children were born, and one of them lies buried. I know not how soon I shall see you again.
And so the address by which Lincoln bade farewell to Springfield was preserved for posterity through the actions of an Associated Press correspondent. (1876) in Bismarck, North Dakota, on May 14th, there was a small gathering in the home of the town's preacher, John P. Dunn. The occasion was a farewell dinner for the quiet, middle-aged man who had become a close friend of the family. In the 3 years he had been reporter for the weekly Bismarck Tribune. His name was Mark Kellogg. He was about to set out on an assignment delegated to him by his employer, a part-time correspondent for the Western Associated Press, who was too ill to make the trip for himself.
Well, Mark, you'll be leaving us in a little while.
Yes, but it won't be for long. As soon as it's all over, I'll be back again.
Where do you go from here, Mark?
Well, Mrs. Dunn, at 3 o'clock, I'll take the ferry across the Missouri and join the troops at Old Fort Lincoln.
Oh. The children are going to miss you.
Well, I'm going to miss them, too. You know, you folks have been just about all the family I've had since my wife died.
You're not going heavily burdened, are you, Mark?
No, I've just this little black satchel. Some tobacco, pipes, pieces of light clothing, pencils, and a supply of light paper, of course, to write my account of the affair. The accounts will be relayed by pony across the plains to the nearest newspaper and telegraph offices.
Oh, how do you intend to travel with the expedition?
They've assigned me a gray mule.
Just think.
With my long legs, I'll probably be riding the mule and walking at the same time. Well, I'll have to go now.
Well, goodbye, Mark.
Goodbye, oh, no, not goodbye. As the French say, au revoir.
All right, men. Halt! There they are in the valley. Well, Kellogg, this is the story you've come for.
Yes, General?
We'll clean them out in no time. Trooper!
Yes, sir.
Return to Captain Smith and instruct him to move up immediately with the ammunition packs.
Yes, sir.
All right, men. There they are. We'll scatter them like a nest of ants. This will be worth seeing, Kellogg.
It certainly will, General Custer.
All right, men. Charge! And among the 225 bodies dotting the field of the Little Bighorn, silent in the hot sun near the body of General Custer, they found the crumpled body of the correspondent who had trotted gallantly to death on the small gray mule. In 1907, Sam Davis, a Nevada correspondent of the Associated Press, interviewed Sarah Bernhardt for the Carson Appeal, his own paper, for the San Francisco Examiner, which he also represented, and for the Associated Press. The actress liked him so much that when her train was ready to leave, she put her hands on his shoulders and kissed him on each cheek and then squarely on the mouth. She said,
Monsieur Davis, the right cheek for the Carson Appeal. So, the left for the Examiner, n'est-ce pas? And the lips, my friend, for yourself. Voilà.
Well, Madam Bernhardt, I also represent the Associated Press, which serves 380 papers west of the Mississippi River alone.
It was October 1917, and there was fighting in Mexico between Pancho Villa and President Carranza, with Villa anxious to impress the United States by defeating the president. Early in October, Norman Walker, Associated Press correspondent, reached his camp. Villa had known the reporter during several years of assignment south of the Rio Grande.
And so, Senor Walker, I'm going to take you into my confidence.
Yes, Pancho?
I want to show your country who is master in Mexico. Now, the best way to do this is by victories, is that so?
Quite right.
Well, the town of Ojinaga is held by the Carrancista forces. I'm going to attack the town and take it. In this way, I will show the United States who is master of Mexico. Now, as a newspaper man, I want to ask you, is this the right time to make that attack?
Well, Pancho, if you're looking for publicity, I can't think of a worse time to take that town.
No? For why?
Because right now, the World Series is starting. You know how popular baseball is with us Americans. And what front-page space isn't given to the European war will be given to the World Series. Now, if you wait until the World Series is over, you might make the front pages.
Villa waited, and when he finally took Ojinaga, he did make the front pages. November 7th, 1918, New York went mad. The men who looked out from 51 Chambers Street, New York headquarters of the Associated Press, wore worried expressions. A dumbfounded editor had torn across the newsroom with the message which told the story. Inarticulately, he thrust it into the hands of Jackson Elliott, chief of the news department.
Now, what's this? Other press associations flashing armistice sign.
Here's another one, Jackson.
Yeah. Opposition has armistice. Good Lord, the Associated Press beating on the biggest story of the war. Get cables after London and Paris. Full rate. Open up a line to the State Department.
Right.
I'll talk to Frank Polk. And bring me a map.
Yeah, here's some messages just came in from the member papers.
And let me see. Why doesn't the Associated Press have the armistice? And look at this one. The Associated Press is pro-German, withholding news of the armistice. We've been beaten here, resigning our membership as soon as possible.
Telephone for you, Jackson.
Yeah, I'll take it. Hello? Yes, I know. But we've no news that the armistice has been signed. Our men abroad are all on the job. The State Department has made no such announcement. No, it hasn't. When the Associated Press gets the news, we'll carry it, and not before. Let me look at that map. The opposition flash states that the armistice has been signed at 11 a.m. Now, Roma, what do you got?
At 12:30 this morning, the German High Command wirelessed Marshal Foch the names of its emissaries and requested that he designate a point along the front where they'd be permitted to enter the Allied lines.
I see.
Foch's reply, sent at 1:25 a.m.,
1:25,
says that the party would be permitted to pass at the French outpost near the Chemin-Fourmi-La Chapelle-Guise road.
Go on.
For at least 3 hours longer, the German emissaries have known to have been still at German General Headquarters at Spa, Belgium. Hey, here's a couple of wires saying the General Allied advance is smashing through unchecked.
Yeah, let me see. See now, the airline distance between Spa and Foch's headquarters is roughly about 105 miles as the crow flies. By road, it's probably about 150 miles. Speedy automobile trip is impossible. Those roads have been too badly shelled. Gentlemen, it can't be done. The Germans could not have reached Foch's headquarters in time to sign an armistice at 11 a.m.
Meanwhile, the crowds in the street, learning that the Associated Press had not carried the news of the armistice, became angry.
Down with the Associated Press! They don't want pro-German!
Yeah, pro-German!
Come on, let's clean out the rats!
Elliot?
Yes?
We got Undersecretary of State Polk on the wire for you.
Hello, Mr. Polk. Now, look, about this armistice. Huh? Yes, I see. All right, thank you. I'll put this on the wire. Washington, November 7th. Was officially announced at the State Department at 2:15 o'clock this afternoon that the Germans had not signed armistice terms.
But 4 days later, on November the 11th, 1918, in the office of the Tribune Herald at Rome, Georgia, a member of the Associated Press, J.D. McCarney, sat at a telephone answering the endless queries.
Yes, ma'am, it's right this time.
Who says the armistice has been signed?
The State Department at Washington.
Oh, sure. Well, does the Associated Press say it?
In 1937, Spain was in the throes of a ghastly civil war. Among the reporters describing the conflict was Edward J. Neal, Jr. of the Associated Press, who had also helped cover the war in Ethiopia. On December 31st, the Franco headquarters lifted the ban on correspondence at the front, which had been in effect for several days. And Neal and several colleagues, including Richard Sheepshanks of the Reuters Agency and H.A.R. Philby of the London Times, started out from the base at Zaragoza towards the besieged town of Teruel. At noon, the press cars turned off the shell-pocked main road and jolted towards the next little hamlet, Caude.
Say, Ed, I wonder where we are.
I don't know. Just keep going until we stop.
Alto!
Oh.
Who are you?
We're newspaper men. Here are our passes.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, you cannot go any further forward. It's too dangerous.
Yeah, but look, we got to go forward. Look, officer, can't you see?
I am very sorry. You're too near the fighting zone now. I fear someone has blundered in allowing you to come so far. It's very dangerous here.
Well, can't go on, we can't go on.
That is very wise, gentlemen. I hope to see you later.
Say, Ed,
Right.
you got a light?
Oh, yeah. Here you are.
Thanks. You fellas want some chocolate?
Hello, fellas.
Oh, hello. Hello, Johnson. Got any more material for your magazine articles?
No, but I got some fine photographs. Mind if I get in the car with you guys and chew the fat a while?
No, come right in.
Just got back from photographing the heavy artillery. Got some grand pictures.
Lucky stiff. Well, boys, how about going back? Oh, good heavens.
Captain!
Well, what happened?
The shell exploded right in front of our car. They're in there.
Oh, Santa
They're
Maria.
in there.
Hola, muchachos, vengan a ayudar.
Gotta get them out of there. Come on.
Well, this one is dead. This one is badly wounded. His temple is torn open.
Oh, that Sheepshanks of the Times. How about Neil, that one?
Well, he looks very bad. His left leg is pretty badly torn. Let's get him out of here. Ande, muchachos.
Lift him up.
Pronto, los gitanos.
Careful.
Right here.
Easy. Good work, boys. Sorry I'm so heavy. Keep an eye on my typewriter, will you, Philby? Who's that on the ground? It's Brandish Johnson. We'll get you to the base hospital at Zaragoza.
Well, I guess the war's over for me.
Say it. How are you?
Oh, hello. Not bad for a man who had 34 shell fragments taken out of him.
You know, Ed, I filed your story to New York.
Well, that's swell, thanks. Too bad about Dick, isn't it?
Oh, you heard that Sheepshanks died?
Yeah, I heard. They're burying poor Dick tomorrow, and I'm afraid I can't go to the funeral. Oh, tell my office I'm going to Paris as soon as I can. I'll soon be all right again.
All right, Ed. Oh, say, the nurse is giving us the bye-bye sign. I'll have to go.
Oh, so long. Till tomorrow.
Cheerio.
I wish I could go to the nearest cafe with you and have a big cold beer.
Blood transfusions seemed to help Neil, but by the next morning, gangrene developed. He died late that night. In New York, after making special financial arrangements for Mrs. Neal and setting up an annuity fund for the support of his son and his education through college, the Board of Directors adopted this resolution.
The Board of Directors of the Associated Press, as representatives of the entire membership, by this means enter into the permanent records of the institution this memorial to Edward J. Neal, Jr., gallant reporter who died in the Associated Press service at Zaragoza, Spain, as a result of wounds he suffered while reporting the encounter on the Teruel front. If democratic institutions are to prevail, as we all believe they will, the public must be fully informed as to what is happening in the world. We recognize that the good reporter is the keystone of our journalistic edifice. Believing this, we also believe that Edward J. Neal's death was not in vain. He undertook a perilous assignment at our behest, and he carried it out gloriously. As chroniclers of the day's events, we are proud to pay tribute to his memory.
They buried Neal in his native Massachusetts on January 21st with flowers from all over the world heaped high over his grave. And in the snow and zero cold of the Teruel front, another staff man, Dwight L. Pitkin, took up the assignment Neal had begun. And today, Associated Press correspondents throughout the world are covering the news, getting their stories out sometimes under the most heroic circumstances so that you, who read your newspapers and listen to the radio, may know the truth. And now, we are privileged to have as a guest the General Manager of the Associated Press, Kent Cooper. Mr. Kent Cooper. Mr. Cooper, we've traced the history of the Associated Press almost up to the present time. But there are a number of questions about your organization as it is today that I'm sure our listeners would like you to answer. For example, I'm sure they'd be interested in finding out how many member papers the Associated Press now has and how many correspondents you employ.
Well, Mr. Martin, the Associated Press has about 1,400 member newspapers in the Americas, and throughout the world it serves directly or indirectly 3 times that many. I should say there are about 7,500 full and part-time Associated Press correspondents in the United States and Canada.
And how does one become a foreign correspondent for the Associated Press?
They are selected from the hundreds of trained newspaper men working in Associated Press bureaus throughout the United States. They are chosen not only because they asked for such service, but because their education and experience qualify them. Some of these men have specialized in the history and politics of the various countries. Some of them know foreign languages before they go abroad, while others learn the language of the country on the spot. Good character and professional competence are more important than any other qualification, but, of course, a genuine knowledge of languages is essential to any foreign correspondent.
Well, that's mighty interesting. And how does a foreign correspondent become a war correspondent?
Simply by being on or near the spot when the war starts. War, Mr. Martin, is a news story like any other.
That's right. Have you many more war correspondents covering the Soviet-German conflict?
Oh, yes, dozens of them.
And tell us, how do you get your news from the war fronts to America? It must be very difficult.
Yes, transmission of news always is a problem. And, of course, it's constantly an acute one in war, because conditions change frequently. News from the front is sent to bureaus in various capitals by telegraph or telephone. Then Moscow, Helsinki, Stockholm, and other bureaus send dispatches by wireless to New York. News sent from Berlin is telephoned to Bern, Switzerland, for relay by wireless to New York, or it is sent directly by wireless from Berlin to New York.
Well, one last question, Mr. Cooper. What has been the latest development in aiding Associated Press news coverage?
Wire photo, the Associated Press news photo service in which pictures are delivered to members throughout the United States by wire, just as news stories are. Many regard wire photo as the outstanding journalistic development of recent years. Whatever comes, AP member newspapers intend to continue to utilize every means at their disposal to see that the Associated Press does its job, to report in word and picture, discerningly and without bias, the news of the entire world.
Thank you very much, Kent Cooper. And now we take you to the NBC newsroom.
From the Associated Press, Germany claims sweeping successes in the war against Russia. The Nazi High Command says that over 4,000 Soviet planes were destroyed and more than 2,200 Russian tanks were captured in the first week of fighting. During that time, the German High Command says it trapped 2 Soviet armies and plunged through into Russia to the region around Minsk at the end of the motor highway leading to Moscow. But Russia tells another story. Moscow says that the German tanks charging toward the cities of Minsk and Luk have been stopped by the Red Army, and that Soviet troops are meeting large contingents of German motorized infantry in fierce hand-to-hand combat. The Soviet Information Bureau claims that the German invaders have suffered many casualties. Meantime, the major battle continues to pivot around the central salient on the 1,000-mile Russian-German front. The London radio says that a British economic mission conferred today in Moscow with the Soviet Commissar for Foreign Trade. And there's a sharp criticism in London of the German claims of success against the Soviet army. London says that the Nazi statement regarding the destruction of more than 4,000 Soviet planes cannot be taken seriously, and the British go on to accuse the German High Command of other inaccuracies in their reporting of German progress against the Soviet. Just a few moments ago, the NBC shortwave listening post picked up a German language broadcast from Moscow radio saying that the battles are going on in Romania on the southern side of the Danube. And this report would indicate that the Russians have crossed the Danube into Romania and have taken the offensive on that front. Germany's Axis partner, Italy, warns against expecting a lightning victory over Russia. The authoritative fascist editor, Virginio Gaida, says that Russia is resisting not only with a mass of arms, but with the factor of distance. And Gaida brings up the similarity of the Russian position in this war to Russia's position during the Napoleonic campaign and during the World War. In the Near East, Cairo reports a fierce battle in the air, in which American-built planes flown by the Dutch and the French defenders of Syria were beating off British-built fighters. The engagement took place over central Syria. In another air fight, a squadron of American Curtiss Tomahawks in the Australian Air Force is credited with shooting down 6 Glenn Martin bombers flown by the French. This news from the Associated Press came to you from the NBC newsroom in New York. For further details, see your local newspaper.
The dramatizations this afternoon were based on the book A.P., The Story of News by Oliver Gramling, which will be dramatized and brought to the New York stage by producer Oscar Serlin, producer of Life with Father. Next week, Behind the Mic will present one of its most interesting human interest stories in relating how a daytime radio serial is conceived. You will learn how a radio columnist gets the material he writes. We'll salute a program you loved with Jane Froman, and we'll bring you more of the glamour, the tragedy, and the comedy that are Behind the Mic. This is Gilbert Martin saying, good afternoon, everyone.
Behind the Mic is written by Mort Lewis. Music composed by Ernie Watson, conducted by Jimmy Lytle. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Radio's own show, Behind the Mic. Radio. With a switch of a dial, radio brings you tragedy, comedy, entertainment, information, education, a whole world at your command. But there are stories behind radio, stories behind your favorite programs and favorite personalities, and radio people you never hear of, stories as amusing, dramatic, and interesting as any make-believe stories you hear on the air. And that's what we give you, the human interest, the glamour, the tragedy, the comedy, and information that are Behind the Mic. And now, presenting one of radio's most popular announcers, our master of ceremonies, Gilbert Martin.
Thank you, Gilbert Mack, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, Behind the Mic brings you another story about a Zulu radio star as told by Joseph Murray. We present the sound effect of the week, and then a story about another unusual NBC employee, photographer Tommy Weber. You'll hear some amusing mistakes of favorite radio personalities. We salute a program you love, Paul Wing's Spelling Bee. We'll answer letters from listeners. And finally, you'll hear a demonstration of an instrument that might revolutionize radio, the Sonovox. Well, those of you who heard Behind the Mic a few months ago will probably remember an extremely unusual story about a Zulu radio star which was related by Joseph Murray, featured on NBC's program African Trek, which incidentally soon celebrates its 100th broadcast. And now, here is Joe with another true Behind the Mic story about the same character, Joseph Murray. Well, Joe, for the benefit of our listeners who didn't hear you the last time you appeared on our program, will you give us a brief summary of the story you told?
Certainly, Gil. It was about my discovering a magnificent Zulu singer in London when I was doing a program for BBC. The Zulu's name was Tukili. He was a near relative of the regent of Zululand, and I related how, through his appearances on my radio program, he met a Zulu woman whom he later married.
Ah, yes, and that was a grand story, too. Well, now suppose you go on telling us about Tukili.
Well, I'm glad to say that in spite of Tukili's success on the air, he always remained a modest, retiring person. But you know, Gil, it was most interesting for me that although he was educated and certainly, to all appearance, completely civilized, he would never erase the legends and superstitions of his youth. I remember I took him to lunch one day before an important broadcast. We were sitting there about to order our...
Inkosi, I think I will have some soup.
I will too, Tukili. And since this is a special celebration, will you have some chicken? This restaurant makes a specialty of it, you know.
Oh, no, Inkosi, please. I do not want chicken.
Why? What's the matter, Tukili? Don't you like chicken?
Inkosi, I do like chicken. But tonight I must sing and speak on the air. I must have courage. If I eat chicken, I shall be as timid as that bird.
Yes, I know that many of your fellow tribesmen believe that what one eats affects one's character and ability to perform or not perform certain deeds. But to Keeley, you certainly know this is mere superstition.
Perhaps you are right, but nevertheless...
Let's prove these beliefs are foolish. I'll order the chicken, and you eat some. You'll see that nothing bad will happen, and you won't be a slave to such silly superstitions.
Very well, Nkosi.
Well, what happened that evening, Joe?
Well, when we went to the studio for the broadcast, in which I not only appeared but directed, I was seated in the control room, and we were nearing the cue at which Tukili was to speak and then sing.
Oh, I say, what's the matter with Tsukili? He's positively shaking.
Yes, I've noticed it myself.
Well, look, he's running out of the studio. He's to go on in a moment.
Well, fetch him back, quick. He'll ruin the broadcast.
And did he come back?
Yes. Right on cue, Tsukili came in calmly. He spoke and sang and did a magnificent job. Well, after the broadcast, I talked to Tsukili. I took him to one side and said, "Well, you gave me a fright, Tsukili."
I ask Nkosi pardon, but that chicken...
Well, don't tell me you blame the chicken.
Yes, Nkosi. I should not have eaten that weak, timid hen. I became chicken-hearted.
But Tsukili, you did splendidly on the air.
That is because, Nkosi, I had something that made my tongue speak and sing.
And that was?
The tongue of a nightingale, Nkosi. All afternoon I have spent looking for a bird shop, searching for a bird of magic voice. It cost much, but if I had not swallowed the tongue which I had with me in a little box, I should not have been able to sing.
And thank you, Joseph Murray, for another swell Behind the Mic story. The sound effect of the week. From time to time, Behind the Mic presents some unusual sound effect. One of radio's more popular new programs is The Adventures of the Thin Man, and Asta, the wire-haired fox terrier who was introduced in the motion picture The Thin Man, is a very important character. Asta greets his master and mistress. Somebody steps on Asta's paw. Asta begs for attention. Ah, yes, nice doggy. And how's it done? By records? No. By mirrors? No. No, Asta is actually about 5'4" with a little mustache. Yes, in fact, one of radio's cleverest character actors, Gilbert Mack. And this is his only animal impression. Say, Gilbert, I think our listeners might like to hear you interviewed. Now, of course, most good interviews with celebrities at least contain some reference to tastes. What is your hobby?
Taking home movies of my my baby.
And what is your favorite program?
I am now on Behind the Mic.
Nicely said. And what is your favorite food?
Dog biscuits.
All right, thank you, Asta, or rather, Gilbert Mack. As we said on a previous broadcast, there are men and women in the employ of the National Broadcasting Company, people you don't hear regularly on the air who have backgrounds and stories as fascinating as any of the stars that broadcast. This afternoon, we present another of these interesting people whom you don't generally meet, but who are behind the mic. Our guest is NBC's chief photographer and photo editor, Tommy Weber. And Tommy, what is your job at NBC?
Mainly, Gil, I either take pictures or supervise the photographing of NBC's performers and operations.
And why do you take these pictures?
They are sent to a large number of newspapers and other publications throughout the country. The number of people reading the radio pages is increasing constantly, and these folks show a decided interest in seeing their radio favorites in their local newspapers.
Tommy, I know that before you became chief photographer for NBC, you were a newspaper reporter covering many big stories. But the reason we singled you out this week as an interesting NBC employee was because of something you initiated in American journalism. And now, suppose you tell us about it.
I was working for the New York Journal American, and one day back in 1935, the city editor called me over to the desk and said,
Say, Tommy, you fool around with photography, don't you?
Yeah, I have a candid camera. Taking pictures is a hobby.
Well, look, we're getting consistently beaten on pictures. Our papers in this town or other papers are getting their pictures into paper before we do. Now, you're a bright boy. See if you can't figure out some way in which we can beat these other papers on photos. I think one of the things you might do is...
Well, later I was walking with George Reedy, a journal photographer who had been a signal officer in the First World War. Just talking about photos, Reedy was one of the lads that taught me to shoot pictures. When he happened to look up.
Say, Tommy, look at that fellow go.
Yeah, what is it?
It's a homing pigeon.
Gee, he certainly does travel, doesn't he?
Yeah, about 50 or 60 miles an hour. We use them in the war to carry messages. Tie a little capsule to their legs with a message in it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Say, why couldn't we use pigeons to carry pictures?
Pictures?
Yeah. Pictures back to the paper. Say, I've got an idea.
Well, what'd you do then, Tommy?
I told my boss about the idea, and at first he thought I was a little nuts. Then he said to follow it up. I went down on the east side where a lot of kids have these homing pigeons on their roofs, and I hired a dozen of them for $2. That Sunday, I went up to Bear Mountain with Reedy and shot some pictures. I put the negatives in an empty lipstick container, attached it to the pigeon's leg, and released them.
Mm-hmm, and I bet they sped right back to their home, didn't they?
Well, no, they didn't. I wish they had. Only 2 of them got in, but it took about 3 hours for them to make it. We could have driven down from Bear Mountain in an hour and a half. Well, I told the city desk about it.
Well, that's not so good, Tommy. 3 hours for those birds to get in.
But at least they did get back. I'd like to keep working on it. I think we have something here.
Okay, I'll give you a couple of weeks to fool around in.
And what was the result?
Well, I'd go out on assignments by myself and take the camera along and try to fly the pictures back into the office.
And how did it work out?
Not so good. Then we decided to hire an expert on pigeons. He was Harry Meyer, who had been a pigeon specialist in the United States Army Signal Corps. He really knew pigeons. This Meyer was a completely amazing chap. He got some hens and had them set their eggs on the roof of the Journal American. These pigeons were of a special stock that Meyer had bred for the Army, and they could fly circles around most other birds. Pigeons home, as you might say, to the place where they are born. And these squeakers, which is the slang for the youngsters, were soon flying back to the Journal. Shortly, we thought we had an opportunity to prove how really valuable they were. The ex-mayor, Jimmy Walker, and his wife were returning from Europe. The Journal hired a plane to take Meyer and me out past Sandy Hook to meet the boat. I radiophoned to Walker and asked him and his wife to be up on the top deck of the ship. Then we flew out. We actually flew the plane between the stacks of the ship and photographed Jimmy and Mrs. Walker waving to us from the boat deck. Then we removed the film from the camera, placed it in the pigeon's leg, wrapped the pigeon in gauze, and threw him out of the plane, holding on to one end of the gauze, of course.
Well, why'd you do that?
Well, the pigeon couldn't fly until he was completely unwrapped from the gauze, and by that time he was free of the slipstream. If he got caught by the stream, it would have been bye-bye bird. It took 2 hours for the boat to dock, and when we landed, Walker's picture and story were on page 1 of the Journal, all this before the other cameramen had gotten off the boat. Again, we had beaten the town. And how?
Well, I think that certainly proved the pigeons could do their stuff, didn't it?
Yes, Gil, but their real value was better proven in 1938. Meyer and I had just covered a story in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and were driving toward New York when we got a message from our city desk over the shortwave radio.
Say, Weber, the Connecticut River's flooded its banks and Hartford's underwater. All the telephone and power lines are down. Get up there and get a story and get us back some pictures.
Well, we turned around and drove to Hartford. The state guardsmen were there, and they wouldn't let us into the city. No one could get in or out. We drove back a couple of miles, and we came upon a girls' school, and there was an idea. There was an American flag on the porch of the school. We lifted the flag, pole and all, stuck it in the front of our car, and drove back to Hartford with the siren screaming. This time, the soldiers let us go by. As a matter of fact, they saluted as we went past.
Well, Tommy, I'll bet that took plenty of nerve.
Gee, I don't know about nerve, Gil. I think it's more crust than nerve. At any rate, we drove into Hartford, and we could see that some of the streets were pretty well underwater. We got a blowtorch out of our toolkit. This fellow Meyer had everything, Gil. And removed some asphalt from the pavement. With this, we sealed the breather vent on the car. We did this, of course, so that the water wouldn't get into the oil and stall the machine. Then we drove through the water. When it got too deep, I hired a boat and rode into the lobby of the Bond Hotel and registered. Then we went out and got the pictures. You see, Gil, the lights, telephones, and telegraph lines were all down, so if we could get our stuff from Hartford to New York, we were really going to have a real beat. Later that night, I wrote the story on tissue and developed the pictures. At dawn, we let 14 pigeons go with story and photos.
Mm-hmm. And what happened?
Well, they brought 26 pictures and 1,200 words, flying 135 miles to New York in 2 hours and 55 minutes. And the Journal American was the only one to have any pictures or story of the tragedy that day. We beat everybody, but how?
Well, that's a mighty interesting story, and our thanks to you, Tommy Weber, for another story behind the career of a guy who is behind the mic. Oddities in Radio. This week, through the courtesy of Movie Radio Guide, we present another group of unintentionally amusing remarks made on the air by favorite announcers or commentators. Tom Lattimore, announcer on station WRAL, bloomed with this beauty.
It is said that Abraham Lincoln wrote his famous Gettysburg Address while traveling from Washington to Gettysburg on the back of an envelope.
And today we have to use trains. Well, Bill Henry, commentator on station WCAU, said,
yesterday I called up Hedda Hopper and found her right in the middle of a cool glass of lemonade.
Boy, a nice way to spend a hot day, that is, if you can get in the glass, of course. Well, Don O'Brien, baseball announcer on station WNAX, during a broadcast of a game, said,
Catcher Baker stands there with everything off but his shin guards.
If television ever comes in, that kind of thing will have to stop, believe me. An announcer on station WJPR with more truth than tact said,
This is a transcribed announcement.
And an announcer on station WENR in Chicago, my old station, came out with this one.
If you have to struggle with your baby to eat it, it's a strain on both of you.
Boy, you said it, especially on the baby. Radio believe that radio has a tradition of which it can well be proud, a tradition of good programs that linger fondly in our memory. And so each week we bring you a star or a part of a program you used to hear, a program you love. This afternoon, Behind the Mic salutes Paul Wing's Spelling Bee, which was on the air from 1935 to 1939. And Paul, well-known writer and radio actor, also conducted 1,000 Pennies for Your Thoughts, which was featured on the air this past summer. But now, Paul Wing's Spelling Bee. 4 of the people appearing on today's Behind the Mic will participate and try to spell the toughies that Paul throws at them. Our contestants are Tommy Weber, Joseph Murray, our orchestra leader Paul Lavelle, and myself, Gilbert Martin. And now here is Paul Wing to conduct the Spelling Bee.
Thank you. Thank you, Gil Martin. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may remember that one of the features of the Spelling Bee is always what we call the verbal treasure chest, and that each word in the verbal treasure chest has a price upon its head, depending on how difficult it is to spell. Well, every word in this Behind the Mic version of the Spelling Bee is going to have a treasure chest word with a value for its correct spelling. The words are on folded slips of paper here in this goldfish bowl. The spellers will draw them out and hand them to me as their turns come, and of course the man who has won the most money at the end will win the match. Now, will you draw the first word, Tommy Weber? Here it comes. Only one. Will you be satisfied with this one?
That's all.
He gave me 2. All right. This is a 69-cent word. That's for today only. 69 cents for today only, Tommy. The word is benign, the adjective of a joyous and of a kind and gentle disposition. Gracious.
B-E-N-I-G-H-N.
You know, just at a glance at you is enough to tell me that you are benign, but that spelling is wrong.
Oh, I'm going back to taking pictures.
B-E-N-I-G-N. Around here to the end of the line, Tommy. Now, here's Joe Murray. Joe, will you give me your first word out of the goldfish bowl here? Here it comes, and as soon as I get it unfolded, this is the 51-cent word. That's 51 cents, including sales tax, Joe.
All right.
Deuced, the adjective meaning plaguey, confounded, used in mild imprecations.
D-E-U-C-I-D.
D-E-U-C-I-D.
Come over.
Come on over. It's D-E-U-C-E-D, Joe. All right, here's Gil Martin. Gil, let me have your first word out of the goldfish bowl, eh?
That's right.
Here it comes, and
That's one.
It is the 29-cent word. Booze, the verb meaning hoots, jeers. Booze.
B-O-O-S. Apostrophe S.
No, I was only waiting for you to pronounce it. B-O-O-S is right. That's quite right, and booze didn't go to your head that time.
Thank you.
That's correct, and you get the 29 cents. And here's Joe Murray for his first word. And, Paul Lavelle. Pardon me, Paul. Here's Paul for his first word. Now, Paul, I know that musicians are notoriously weak spellers. So I'm going to give you a break on this word. You can spell this one on your clarinet. Just get your clarinet, will you? In other words, you may play it instead of spelling it. Now, the word is the word efface, the verb meaning to cancel, to blot out, to obliterate, to erase. Efface. Why, Paul. That's wonderful. E-F-F-A-C-E, just as plain as the nose on your face.
The clarinet?
If you'd only compose an introduction and a coda to that, I think you'd have a #1 hit on the hit parade. Say, maybe that's a new idea in composition. Let's get it copyrighted, eh?
Right.
All right, fine. You get, for that, you get 49 cents, and that's priced especially for you. Thank you very much, Paul. All right, here's Tommy Weber for his second word. Tommy, let's see it. This is a good one, I'm sure. This is the 39-cent word, Johnny cake. A kind of bread made of Indian meal, flour, eggs, milk, and so you must remind me after the program to give you my recipe for Johnny cake.
I can't cook either as well as that. Johnnnycake.
39 cents is yours. That's right.
Am I lucky?
That is correct. All right, Joe, let's have your second word.
Dear.
Out of the goldfish bowl. Here it comes, and he's having a little trouble getting it.
Yes, a little nervous.
It's elusive as a goldfish, wasn't it? 39 cents this one is worth. Wherewithal. That with which anything can be purchased or done. You know, Mazuma, the long green.
W-H-E-R-E-W-I-T-H-A-L.
And that's correct. There's 39 cents more for you to pay an income tax on next year. All right, Gil, let's have your second word.
All right.
This is the 49-cent words going up a little bit.
Better.
Yes, going up a little bit. This word is yours.
Yeah, I know that, but what is it?
Yours. Wide-mouthed pitchers or jugs. Yours.
U-R-S.
Paragraph.
Yeah.
U-R-S paragraph. Well, it's E-W-E-R-S, Gil. I'm sorry. But Gil, you're one of my favorite announcers. All right, Paul, let's have yours. Here's Paul Laval for his second word, and this is the 69-cent word, gossipy. Gossipy, the adjective full of or given to gossip.
Can I use a clarinet on this one?
You can if you can put S's and Y's and things in your clarinet. All right, gossipy.
G-O-S-S-I-P-Y.
Why, Joe, Paul, that gossip that's going around the studio is that you're quite right and that you win 69 cents.
Thank you.
That's absolutely correct. Now, here's Tommy Weber. Lucky Weber, he says. Come on up to the microphone, Tommy. And the word is the 79-cent word, tiddlywinks. Tiddlywinks.
Great God. T-I-D-D-L-Y-W-I-N-K-S, I hope.
Well, you know, you have spelled another word. You've spelled tiddlywinks. And that's also a name for the game, but you didn't spell the word I gave you, tiddlywinks.
Oh, well, you just left out the syllable, so did I. I'll go over and stand in the corner.
I didn't leave it out, but you did. It's T-I-D-D-L-E-D-Y-W-I-N-K-S. You know, Mort Lewis is making a lot of money on this. He doesn't have to pay any of these prizes that you lose. Joe, this is the most expensive word in the whole treasure chest. This is the 98-cent word. Hobbyhorsical. Hobbyhorsical, the adjective meaning having a hobby.
H-O-B-B-Y-H-O-R-S-I-C-A-L.
And will you pronounce it?
Hobbyhorsical.
And that's correct. All right, here's Gil Martin for his last word.
All right.
And it is the 79-cent word, Gil. Champagne. Oh, perhaps I'd better define this one for you. I don't suppose you're any more familiar with it than I am. A sparkling white wine made originally in the province of Champagne, France. 79 cents. Of course, at that price, it's domestic champagne.
Well, it sounds mighty appetizing, and I would spell that C-H-A-M-P-A-G-N-E, champagne.
You were familiar with it after all. You're the 79 cents is yours. All right, Paul, let's have your last word. And this is the 89-cent word, sockdolager. Sockdolager. Something unusually large. Tommy Weber is handing Paul his clarinet. Sockdolager.
Sockdolager. S-O-C-D-O-L-G-E-R. Sockdolager, that is.
Say, that's wonderful. That's wonderful, but it's not right. It's S-O-C-K-D-O-L-A-G-E-R. Well, our time is up. Gentlemen, you are magnificent, or shall I say wonderful spellers. But the most magnificent of all, the man who wins first honors, is Joe Marais with a total of $1.37.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you all for your gargantuan efforts. And aren't you glad you didn't have to spell that word? Thank you.
And thank you, Paul Wing. Letters from listeners. Etta Price of Duluth, Minnesota says, I heard that Una Merkel, the film comedienne, has been signed for a regular radio series. Can you tell me what it is?
Yes, Miss Merkel will play the title role in Nancy Bacon, Reporter, which starts on the Johnny Presents program Tuesday, November 4th. Miss Merkel will portray a dizzy girl reporter who always manages to get her story.
James Freeman of Jamaica says, I heard Everett Sloan playing the lead on Inner Sanctum Mystery over NBC last Sunday. Now, this is the first time I've ever tuned him in, and I wonder if he's been on radio before.
Everett Sloan is one of radio's best-known character actors. His big chance came in The Rise of the Goldbergs. Since then, he has appeared on hundreds of radio programs and had one of the leading roles in the motion picture Citizen Kane.
And thank you, Don Cordray. On a table in front of our microphone is an invention that may well revolutionize radio. It is called Sonavox. Gilbert Wright, the son of Harold Bell Wright, recently invented this device in Hollywood. Those of you who have seen Walt Disney's The Reluctant Dragon will recall seeing Sonavox demonstrated in that picture. Two radio men, James L. Free of Chicago and H. Preston Peters of New York, recognizing its possibilities, have formed a company to develop Sonavox for broadcasting. Our next guest is a young lady who can tell us about this device and demonstrate some of its uses in radio. Presenting now Miss Sally Franklin of the Wright Sonavox Company. And please, Miss Franklin, just what is Sonavox?
Well, Sonavox is really a substitute for the human larynx or vocal cords. Outwardly, this pair of units resembles a set of old-fashioned earphones, except for a red vibrating button in the center of each. Now, by placing these two vibrating buttons against my throat, any sound which is fed into Sonavox will come out of my mouth and can be made to talk.
That's very interesting. Now, suppose you demonstrate this.
All right, let's turn on a recording of the foghorn, feed this into Sonavox, and thus hear the foghorn coming out of my mouth. Now, by moving my mouth, tongue, and lips, just as if I were talking, but without using my own voice, I can make that foghorn speak. Let's listen. Danger. Danger.
Believe me, Miss Franklin, that's the first time I've ever heard a foghorn voice that wasn't human speak. Well, now, tell me, in what way can Sonavox be used in radio?
Well, for one thing, it can be used in commercial announcements to better identify the product. Instead of the human voice describing an automobile, the automobile motor can describe itself. If that sounds unbelievable, let's give some examples.
All right, we're listening, so go ahead.
Let's take the case of an electric power company as sponsor. We feed the sound of a power hum through Sonavox into my mouth and throat, and the voice of electricity speaks.
I am the voice of power. I light your houses. I run your radios. I relieve your labor. I work for you.
Or we might have a fire insurance company as a sponsor. Well, the sound of a siren on a fire engine might be used to identify the fire insurance, and the commercial would sound something like this.
Are you insured against fire? Don't leave your home or business unprotected. The sound of my voice means tragedy to you unless you are insured against fire.
And now, Sonavox has many other uses in radio besides heightening the commercial, hasn't it, Miss Franklin?
Oh, yes. It might be used in a dramatic script. Let's say the hero has been hit by an automobile. He's in a hospital about to be operated on after his accident. As he goes under the ether, he imagines he hears an auto talking to him, like this.
Look out. I'm I'm coming closer, 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 closer. I'm about to hit you. Look out, look out, look out.
Well, believe me, I was way out of the way that time. And now, can you make musical instruments sing?
I'd sing like a crow myself, but with Sonovox, I can borrow a voice of a violin or a clarinet or an organ or any musical instrument.
By the way, Sally, can you make animals talk?
Yes. Let's say we have a dairy advertising. We might plug their milk by broadcasting a cow mooing and then having that cow talk. First, here's the cow as you and I have always heard her before. And now here's what the cow says.
I'm Daisy, the famous cow. My milk is swell.
Oh, we're sold, Daisy, completely. And thank you, Sally Franklin, for a most unusual demonstration. Well, next week we present more of the glamour, the comedy, and the tragedy that are found behind the mic. And now this is Gilbert Martin saying, good afternoon, everybody.
Behind the Mic is written by Mort Lewis. The original music composed by Ernie Watson. This is the Blue Network of the National Broadcasting Company, RCA Building, Radio City, New York.
Radio's own show, Behind the Mic. Radio. With a switch of a dial, radio brings you tragedy, comedy, entertainment, information, education, a whole world at your command. But there are stories behind radio, stories behind your favorite programs and favorite personalities, and radio people you never hear of. Stories as amusing, dramatic, and interesting as any make-believe stories you hear on the air. And that's what we give you, the human interest, the glamour, the tragedy, the comedy, and information that are Behind the Mic. Now, presenting a man whose name has been a symbol of the best in radio since the beginning of broadcasting, Graham McNamee.
Thank you, Gilbert Mack, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This afternoon, Behind the Mic first presents a return engagement of mimic Arthur Boran, who tells you just how he does his impersonations of famous people. We present the sound effect of the week, and then you will hear the story behind the weird music on the Inner Sanctum program as told by organist Lou White and your host, Raymond. Next, you will hear an oddity in radio about orchestra leader Fred Fradkin. We salute a program you loved, one that featured the voice of delightful Hollis Shaw. We present Mike Scoops, and finally a dramatic story behind the escape of an actress from occupied France, the thrilling story as told by herself. Last week we had as a guest on Behind the Mic one of radio's ace mimics, Arthur Boran. We thought that you might be interested in hearing, for probably the first time, exactly how a radio impersonator goes about developing his impersonations. And here's Arthur Boran, featured on NBC's Vaudeville Theater of the Air, to tell us all about it. Arthur?
Hello, Graham.
Arthur, do you find it difficult to do imitations?
No, Graham. Frankly, I find myself imitating anything I'm impressed with. A noise, a person. I once even heard a beautiful moo from a cow. You wouldn't believe this, but I went around mooing for weeks. Until one day a farmer came over and wanted to milk me.
Well, seriously, Arthur, exactly how do you go about learning how to impersonate somebody?
I do it, Graham, by analyzing the voice of the person I'm trying to imitate. The first thing I do is to get the voice level.
What do you mean, get a voice level?
Well, take Eddie Cantor. If I'm going to imitate Cantor, the first thing I do is gradually raise my voice and experiment like this. Congratulate me, Jimmy. It's my wedding anniversary. To celebrate the occasion, I'm wearing the suit I got married in. You see, at the finish, I raise my voice to the level of Cantor's voice. That's just about it.
Yeah, I was glad you got up there. It's a sort of a tenor voice, isn't it?
That's right. Then the next thing I do is to study the peculiarities of the voice inflections and the vocal characteristics and intonations. For instance, take Eddie Cantor again.
I'll take Cantor's salary. You can take Eddie.
And speaking of my salary, Graham, I'll have you understand my income goes into 6 figures.
Do you mean in income tax?
No, in Ida and my 5 daughters. Ha ha, ha ha. You see, Candace Pepe's voice frequently rises and falls, and he appears to draw a lot of his words from the front of his mouth to the back of his throat, like this. Harry, Harry.
Well, suppose you analyze somebody else's voice for us. How about Lionel Barrymore?
Well, let us say I want to imitate Lionel Barrymore doing a scene from a picture in which he's an attorney pleading with the governor of the state to pardon a condemned young man. And he talks like this. Come on, Tom, and sign that pardon, and give that mother back a son, and give this country back a good citizen. Now, I find that Lionel's voice has a great deal of light and shade to it, high and low register. Notice. Now, I know the judge found him guilty, Tom, but he's only a figurehead. It was an accident, I tell you. He also has a certain rhythm in his speech, about 3 dots and a dash, like this. Dee-dee-dee-da, dee-dee-dee-da. For example, those people out there want to know what you were going to do.
Well, you're right about one thing. Barrymore's voice does go up and down a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, in direct contrast to, let us say, Charles Boyer, whose voice has no range, is baritone in quality, and has no light and shade at all. In fact, it's almost a monotone, like this. Gentlemen, you don't know who I am. Well, I don't blame you, but someday you shall hear of me.
Well, how could you analyze a voice like Charles Lawton's?
Well, Lawton's voice is one of tenor quality. It has about 1.5 octaves range, Graham. There's a slight British accent. He has a definite punch attack at the beginning of a sentence, fading away from a shout to that of practically a whisper, like this. That's the Christian. Come here. Mutiny on the Bounty, eh? Well, a captain's a captain, a seaman's a seaman, and also the lowest form of animal life. I'll live to see the day when you and your band of dirty mutineers are flogged and hanged from the highest yardom in the King's Navy.
Well, blimey down. Well, his voice has a lot of light and shade in it, too, hasn't it?
Yes, quite in contrast to another character who also speaks with a slight accent, and whose voice is a mild monotone. Peter Lorre as Mr. Moto. Charlie, don't get excited, Charlie. We'll solve the mystery. There is an old Chinese proverb which says no disguise can long conceal the truth.
Well, Arthur, what do you think is your best imitation?
Well, I think my best imitation is one I'm going to do right now.
What is it, Arthur?
An imitation of the Invisible Man. I shall now disappear.
Well, wait a minute. Before you do, let me say thank you, Arthur Moran, for a grand story behind the mimic.
Thank you, Graham.
The sound effect of the week. From time to time, Behind the Mic presents some unusual sound effect. One of the most unusual programs in radio, certainly so far as sound effects are concerned, is Superman, which deals with the adventures of a man to whom practically nothing is impossible. He flies through space without wings. He's so strong he breaks down walls with his bare fist. In short, he's terrific. One of the typical effects used on the Superman program is the sound of Superman breaking down a stone wall with his 2 bare hands. Here's the sound. That was done by the sound effects department, building up a miniature wall out of cobblestones, then banging a baseball bat against 2 or 3 at times, and finally pushing over the stones and breaking down the wall, and at the same time playing a record of the crash. That's not only super, that's hooper duper. Anybody who has listened to the Inner Sanctum series of chillers is aware of the importance of the music in creating moods that makes its audience's hair stand on end. So next we present 2 guests, Lou White, the organist who writes and plays the music for the Inner Sanctum program, and your host, Raymond, actor Raymond Edward Johnson, who will explain Lou's weird effects. Lou White and your host, Raymond.
Good afternoon, my stout-hearted friends of the Inner Sanctum. This is Raymond, your host, once more. You may come in now, if you dare. Before we begin, a word to those of you who don't frighten easily. It'll be no disgrace if, before we are finished, you find yourself trembling against your will. Yes. That's how an Inner Sanctum program sometimes opens. It's cheerful, isn't it?
Well, Lou, suppose you and Raymond show us the different ways in which music is used on the Inner Sanctum program to create mood.
Well, you see, the music is sometimes used as background. For example, if Boris Karloff, in a jocular mood, has just cut up 1 or 2 of his friends, giving us a slice of life in the raw. And if he's bothered by his conscience because he hasn't sliced up 3 or 4 more, why, then Lou might play what he calls the dream theme, like this.
I am not mad. Look at me. I can talk and listen and walk and sing just as you do. Let me out. Let me out. I'm not mad, you hear? Listen to me. No one has ever paid me any attention. I've been ignored, a failure. But I showed them I committed the perfect crime. Do you hear? I committed the perfect crime. I'm not crazy. Let me out. Let me out.
Let him out. Well, so that's a dream theme, eh?
It sounds more like a nightmare, doesn't it, Graham?
How did you do that, Lou? Tell us.
Well, I laid one hand flat on several keys of the organ like this. At the same time, the other hand runs up and down the keyboard in an entirely different key like this. Put them both together, and they spell not mother,
but murder.
I see. It's playing music in 2 different keys that gives a peculiar quality to your music. Suppose you give us some other examples of the way music is used to create mood on your program.
Well, in a dramatization of Poe's Merry Tale, The Fall of the House of Usher, there was one droll scene in which a woman thought to be dead had been placed in a coffin in the family vault. Awaking, she rises from the coffin and, dressed in her shroud, walks up a flight of stairs to her brother's bedroom, intending to kill him. You see, he had buried her. That's amusing, huh? You see, her walking up the flight of steps was portrayed by the organ like this.
Lou, that's very remarkable. Suppose you explain just how you achieved that effect.
Well, my right hand played eerie chords like this. My left hand pressed keys that simulated the howl of the wind like this. And then I pressed the bass pedals of the organ to make footsteps like this.
In other words, your music was used instead of a mechanical sound effect. There certainly seems to be considerable difference between inner sanctum music and other kinds.
But I think the best way to demonstrate the difference between ordinary music and inner sanctum music is by first playing a well-known tune in the regular way and then playing it in inner sanctum style. Now, played inner sanctum style, it sounds like this.
Song, Lou. But thank you, Lou White and Raymond Edward Johnson, for a glimpse into the inner sanctum. Oddities in Radio, offering odd little true behind-the-mic stories that help make radio sometimes amusing, sometimes exasperating, but always interesting to the people in it. This week's oddity, an actual experience of Fred Fradkin, orchestra leader on The Adventures of the Thin Man and many other programs. A few years ago, Fred, who is a most delightful violinist, was concertmeister of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Every couple of weeks, Fred would drive in from Boston to spend a day or so in New York. And one week, Fred parked his car in a garage in the 90s. And that morning, with just about enough time left to drive back to Boston in time for a concert which was to be broadcast, Fred walked over to the garage.
Say, could you get my car, please? I'm in a hurry.
Where is your car, buddy?
It's parked on the 5th floor.
The 5th floor? I'm awful sorry, but the freight elevator broke down. We can't take any cars down.
But I've got to get my car. Look, I've got to get back to Boston in time for a big concert. I'm with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. We're going to broadcast. There'll be a whole orchestra full of musicians without a concertmaster. I've got to get that car.
Well, buddy, I'll see what I can do about it.
This being an emergency, the manager of the garage called the elevator company, and they sent an emergency crew of 10 men, who then hand-cranked the elevator to lift it up to the 5th floor.
Well, here we are, buddy. That certainly gave us a half hour of trouble, but, well, we're up here. I never saw 10 guys work so hard in all my life to pull up an elevator. Well, I wouldn't have done that for anybody, not even you, if you hadn't told me you were in such a tough jam.
Well, I want to thank you very much. Why, you know, if I missed that concert... Wait a second. Let's see, where's my car?
Better make it snappy, bud, if you're going to make that concert. Let's see
well,
now.
It isn't here. I've been robbed.
Robbed? Let's have a look at your garage tickets, buddy.
Here it is.
Great jumping horseflesh. No wonder your car isn't here. Your garage is 2 blocks away.
Radio believe that radio has a tradition of which it can well be proud. A tradition of good programs that linger fondly in our memory. And so each week we bring you a star or a part of a program you used to hear, a program you loved. This afternoon we salute the Alec Templeton program, which in 1939 at one time featured the singing of lovely Hollis Shaw. Hollis, an ever-welcome guest, brings us a song she sang on that show, All the Things You Are, which she introduced on Broadway.
Makes the lonely winter seem long. You are the breathless hush of evening that trembles on the brink of a lovely song. You are the angel that lights a star. The dearest things I know are what you are. Someday my happy arms will hold you, and someday I'll know that moment divine.
Thank you, Hollis Shaw. And in case you haven't guessed, Hollis is none other than Vivian on the Phil Spitalny Hour of Charm program. Behind the scenes of European broadcasting are some highly dramatic stories. Not only stories about the broadcasts themselves, but about the people who supply news for these broadcasts. And here's Helen Hyatt, commentator on NBC's program, Today's News, who formerly broadcast from France and Spain. She's going to tell you about such a person. Helen Hyatt. Helen, suppose you begin the story.
Well, when I was broadcasting in Paris a year and a half ago, I used a number of stories about refugees who were arriving in the French capital, refugees from the war zone, because at that time Paris wasn't yet under fire. I got a number of these human interest stories from a young Hungarian actress, Gita Sereni. She's only 20 years old. She'd already been a prize pupil at Max Reinhardt's dramatic school in Vienna. During the war in Paris, she turned from dramatics and had been working for the Auxiliaire Social. That's an organization that took care of refugees. Gita had no nurse's training at all, but she was taking care of children whose parents had been killed by machine guns simply because they flocked around her. Gita didn't leave France when the rest of us did, but stayed all winter caring for all these orphans in occupied France. But Gita, you go on from there.
Well, for some time I've been anxious to get out of occupied France. I was unable to control my tongue, and many times I told Nazi soldiers that I hated them and their cause. They always laughed at me, but eventually I knew I was going to get into trouble. As a Hungarian, I didn't think I would have any difficulty in getting out of the country, and I actually got an exit visa from the German embassy. But when I got to the military authorities, things were different. They made me come back several times, and finally an officer...
Schwester, permission for you to leave has been unfortunately mailed out to your address in the country.
To the Auxiliaire Social?
Yeah. See, here's a list with your name crossed out in red, showing that your visa has been granted. I am very sorry to have caused you this inconvenience, but if you will go to the country, you...
I spent several hundred francs for a railroad ticket from occupied France to Madrid, then went back home and found a letter refusing the visa. Well, that really discouraged me. So I went back to Paris the same day to find out what had happened. When I got to the office of the military authorities...
Schwester, what can I do for you?
What can you do for me? You told me my visa had been mailed to my address in the country. And when I get there, I find permission has been refused.
Schwester, did you really think that we would let you out of the country when we know that you're engaged to an Englishman?
Well, how did you know that?
We looked up your file in the French Prefecture of Police. I am sorry, but you cannot go.
Well, that's what you think. I want you to know that I'm going anyway.
Anyway? How?
Well, I don't know yet. But I just want you to know that. So in case you catch me, you can't say I double-crossed you.
Good luck, Schwester. But I do not think you will get across.
Then what?
Well, I knew there were certain organizations that help people get across the demarcation line. So I made contact with them. One day, I found myself talking.
Yes, mademoiselle?
Well, I want to get across the border to unoccupied France. I'm anxious to go to America.
Well, that is very difficult. It is very dangerous.
Yes, I know that. But I'm willing to take a chance.
Well, then, it will cost you 20,000 francs.
20,000 francs? I haven't got 20,000 francs. I'll give you 2,000.
2,000? My dear girl, 15,000 would be the least we could possibly do it for.
Look, I might be able to raise 4,000.
Oh, not a sou under 12. That is the very least it would cost.
What happened then, Gita?
Well, we finally settled for 7,000 francs. That's about $150 at the prevailing rate of exchange. For that, a man was to be provided who would guide me through the soldiers guarding the border between occupied and unoccupied France, which is separated by a barbed wire fence. Well, accompanied by the guide, I took a train as near as we safely could to the point where we were going to try to cross. There we picked up another girl who also wanted to cross, and the three of us went on in a donkey cart. It was 10 o'clock on a clear, moonlit night. We left the donkey cart outside a farmhouse 300 yards from a demarcation line, and then started for the barbed wire. As we walked along, the guide gave us instructions.
These soldiers have police dogs. We must try to avoid them.
What will we do? Suppose they find us.
Well, then, just stand still. These dogs are trained not to bite unless you move.
Oh, very well. My, what a beautiful moonlit night.
Yes, it is too bad. These soldiers will be able to see us much more easily in the moonlight.
Look, there's the barbed wire fence.
If we can only get over that without being seen.
Oh, on a night as beautiful as this, I don't believe anything could happen.
Listen. The police dogs. Don't move.
They'll find us.
I will drive them away. I have a pocket full of stones. There. Come on. Let us run for that fence.
Sie haben die Hunde weggejagt. Feuer!
It was the soldiers shouting that we had chased the dogs away. Bullets flew all about us. The girl with us was shot in the shoulder. We climbed over the barbed wire and managed to lift her over. Once over the barbed wire, we of course wanted to hide. The Germans have the right to go 200 yards over the French side. But there was nothing to hide behind except 1 or 2 trees. I knew as we stood there that they would find us. About a minute afterwards, 2 young soldiers came to their side of the barbed wire. I realized that the Edelweiss on their uniforms meant that they were Austrians. I came out quite into the open, walked up to them, and faced them across the barbed wire. I gave them a greeting used by Austrian peasants. Grüß Gott. They just looked. And I said, well, I think we ought to talk a little together. Here's quite frankly what happened. I'm Hungarian, but I was born in Vienna. For 10 months now, I've been taking care of children, nursing them. I'm tired. I want to go to Free France for a rest, and I shall be back here on this very same spot in exactly 2 weeks' time. Will you let me through?
But how about that other girl?
Oh, she has a husband in Free France and wants to join him. You know that none of us can get authorizations to get there.
And that man?
Oh, he's my uncle. You can see from my face that I want to do nothing bad. Will you let us through?
You will promise to be back in 2 weeks?
Yes, I will.
So, Heil Hitler.
Then the guide and I took a bus, carried the girl to a bus 26 kilometers away, where she was to take, where we were to take the nearest railroad. We walked from 12:30 to 6 in the morning, and both of us fainted when we got to the bus. The girl we carried seemed to be in much better physical condition than we. Well, from then on, it was a question of getting to America, which was difficult, but not nearly so exciting. And that's how I escaped from France.
Well, what are you doing now, Gita?
Well, I'm going to lecture for the school assembly service for junior colleges and high schools throughout the United States and Canada. And I would also like to be a radio actress over here. I was, as Helen said, a student in Europe with Max Reinhardt.
And she's a darn good actress, too, Graham, if you could see her.
I believe she is. Well, here's wishing you the very best of luck in radio, Gita. And thank you, Gita Serini and Helen Hyatt, for a swell story. Next week, Behind the Mic shows you the important part the telephone lines play in network broadcasting. We bring you more of the glamour, the comedy, and the tragedy that are found behind the mic. This is Graham McNamee speaking. Good afternoon, all.
Behind the Mic is written by Mort Lewis. Original music composed by Ernie Watson, conducted by Zelli. This is the Blue Network of the National Broadcasting Company.
Radio's own show, Behind the Mic. Radio. With a switch of a dial, radio brings you tragedy, comedy, entertainment, information, education. A whole world at your command. But radio isn't all on the surface. There are stories behind radio, stories behind your favorite program, and favorite personalities, and radio people you never hear of. Stories as amusing, dramatic, and interesting as any make-believe stories you hear on the air. And that's what we give you, the human interest, the glamour, the tragedy, the comedy and information that is Behind the Mic. And now presenting the conductor of this program, a man whose name since the beginning of broadcasting has been a byword in radio, Graham McNamee.
Thank you, Gene Hamilton.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience. First off, Behind the Mic presents Warming Up a Studio Audience. You folks at home have been missing something that has become a part of radio broadcasts, and frankly, we don't think you should miss it. You see, you people listening to your radios are easy and relaxed, but when an audience comes into the studio, it is, at first, sometimes generally tense and nervous and possibly a little ill at ease. And now, since the audience plays an important part in any radio broadcast, making it feel at home and introducing it to certain details with which it can cooperate is very important. This is accomplished by doing what is known as warming up the studio audience. I don't have to tell you any more about that because we have the best warmer-upper in radio right here, the famous announcer, Harry Von Zell. And without any further ado, I'm going to call on him to show you what is meant by warming up a studio audience. Harry Von Zell. Hello, Harry. Hi.
I don't know that song, or I could sing a few bars of it to get started. Graham didn't say so, but I think I'd better mention that this sample of a warm-up speech that I'm going to do is the one that I've been doing with the Fred Allen Show. That's a comedy program. And before we go on, 5 or 10 minutes before we go on the air, I hobble out and start this speech. I say, ladies and gentlemen, we have but a very few moments before taking the air. And before that time, we'd like to welcome you here and express to you our thanks for the kind interest which prompts your visit to our broadcast. It's the usual procedure before going on the air for some little man like myself to hobble out and run through a brief recitation of the technical problems we face in the presentation of radio programs. We do that because your understanding of those problems and your cooperation can aid us immeasurably in meeting them. Of course, the most important element is the time element. You know, in radio, when your half hour is up, you go off whether you're ready or not. You can't hang over at the finish, you know. This fact has resulted in some very unsatisfactory finishes for radio programs. You probably have heard at some time or other some poor worried announcer signing off a program in very hurried fashion with words to the effect, "Don't forget to run out in the morning and buy a tube of National Broadcasting Company." It has happened, and of course that only results in bewildering the poor listener who naturally never had any idea that you could buy the National Broadcasting Company by the tube. So we naturally try to avoid that by having as much flexibility as possible in the running time of the show. One means of achieving that desired flexibility is to seek your cooperation in the matter of applause. We ask that during the broadcast you allow us to give you a signal when it's time to stop applauding. We don't like you to overdo it. I think I'd better add, too, so as to avoid any possible misunderstanding, that while we do cue the applause in the interest of saving time, there is at no time during the program any signal of any kind given when it's time to laugh. We wouldn't like to feel that if Mr. Allen or somebody here says something funny, that you were sitting there choking back gales of uproarious laughter waiting for someone here to tell you to let it fly. Quite to the contrary, any time you think you have heard anything funny, you just go ahead and react in any way that suits you best, be it either a giggle, titter, or guffaw. And at such times as that may happen, we here on the stage, a little surprised and very grateful, immediately stop whatever we're doing and hang around until you grow weary of laughing. Then we plunge blindly on into the next bit of hilarious higgledy-piggledy, hoping for more bursts of gay chortles throughout the show. Sometimes we get them and sometimes we don't. Well, we only have 30 seconds now before taking air. It's not as much fun as taking gas, but we sincerely hope that when you leave this studio tonight, you leave feeling that you have enjoyed one of the happiest hours of your lives. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was swell, Harry. I think by now you've got our audience just sizzling. What a pot of gold winner did with his prize money. One of the most popular shows in radio is the Pot of Gold program, conducted by orchestra leader Horace Heidt. For those of you who don't know, the feature of the program is this. Each week, a telephone number is selected somewhere in the United States. The lucky person is then phoned, and if somebody answers the phone, the person who was called becomes the recipient of at least $1,000. Tonight, we bring you a Pot of Gold prize winner of a year ago to ask him what he's done with the money he was awarded. Introducing Mr. Sidney Anthony of Stamford, Connecticut. Mr. Anthony, when did you win your pot of gold money?
October 17th, 1939. And my prize money amounted to $1,900.
As much as that?
Yes. You see, if your phone number is selected and called and nobody answers the phone, you receive only $100 instead of the $1,000. The extra $900 is added to the persons whose money is followed the next week. Week before, the person who had been phoned was not at home. I received the additional $900.
I suppose that money of yours came in mighty handy, didn't it?
It certainly did. Business had been going steadily downhill the past few years, and that made it even more welcome.
What business are you in?
The house moving business.
Mr. Anthony, what have you done with that $1,900 that rolled in so unexpectedly?
Well, Mr. McNamee, I manage our business. It's a sort of family affair, and I used some of the money to pay a few of the company bills. I also paid all my personal bills.
You certainly weren't wasting your money.
I don't think so. And then the rest of it put me on the way to achieve an ambition. I lost my home to a mortgagee about 3 years ago, and ever since I have wanted to build a new home in the same neighborhood. Well, with the rest of the pot of gold money, I bought a building lot, and since then have built a foundation, and someday I'm going to build the rest of the house.
Well, you certainly have proven wrong the old saying that unearned money never did anybody any good. Thank you, Mr. Anthony, very much for coming here today. Behind the Mic presents the story behind how a radio program influenced a listener. Standing at the microphone is one of radio's most talented writers, Jane West, the author of the popular daytime serial, The O'Neills. Jane, that was a most interesting story you told me about the effect of your program on a listener. And I'd like you to tell it to our audience. Will you please?
Why, certainly, Graham. Not long ago, I went into a New York department store to buy some dresses. And one of the saleswomen whom I knew greeted me with, "Hello, Mrs. O'Neill. Is your program still on the radio?" I said, "Yes, we're still going along." And at that, a lady who was standing next to me said,
Pardon me, I couldn't help overhearing. Are you really Mrs. O'Neill of the Radio O'Neills?
Why, no, I'm not Mrs. O'Neill. I play the part of Mrs. Bailey in the story, and I also write the script.
Oh, then you wrote the words that have played such an important part in my life.
Why?
My life.
Why, how do you mean?
Won't you sit down a minute?
Well,
please, I feel I've just got to tell you. You see, I used to live here in New York, and I was very happily married. And then my husband bought a very promising store in a little town upstate, and that's where our troubles began. I didn't know anybody in the town, and I was lonely and dreadfully unhappy. I even refused to try to make friends, and it seemed that my husband and I did nothing but quarrel. And finally things got so bad between us that at last I went to see a lawyer about getting a divorce. And after telling him my story...
Well, the situation is unpleasant, probably for both of you. But I don't think it necessitates divorce. After all, you've been married happily for years. You have 2 lovely children. You know, divorce would mean a miserable existence for them especially. Now, why don't you go home and try to work out some sort of an adjustment?
While I was at the lawyer's that afternoon, a radio had arrived at our house. We hadn't had a radio since we moved from New York because the current in our new home was AC instead of DC. And a couple of days later, while I was still thinking over the lawyer's advice, I was fiddling around the radio, and just by accident, I tuned in on the O'Neills. And through sheer coincidence, it was the episode where Peggy O'Neill was contemplating divorcing her husband, and Mother O'Neill was advising her.
Peggy, dear, you've got to think more carefully before you take such a drastic step. It isn't easy to face the future alone after years of married happiness, and love, and companionship. Your husband perhaps has made a mistake. Even say that he has. But have you made every effort possible to try to save your marriage, your home, and future for your children? Have you really tried to meet him halfway? Peggy, when you married Monty, you entered into a lifetime contract, for better or for worse. And you should honestly try to live up to that agreement, just as much as you would to a business contract. Darling, you must be more understanding, more unselfish, and more forgiving, more loving, and more willing to help.
I was fascinated. Mother O'Neill seemed to be talking to me. I could hardly wait to hear the following day's episode, which also concerned Peggy's proposed divorce. And I started to apply Mrs. O'Neill's advice to my own experience. I took an interest in the community and the people around me. I made friends, and I tried to understand my husband's problems. And to make a long story short, I'd never want to live any place else than where I am. And I've never been so happy in all my life.
Thank you, Jane West, for a most interesting story. And thanks to you, Kate McComb, for your sympathetic characterization of Mother O'Neill. story behind animals on radio programs. When a radio script calls for a hippopotamus, an African warthog, or a chickadee, instead of going out personally to enlist these animals for the sake of realism, the director generally calls upon one of a small group of men who specialize in animal sounds. Among these animal impersonators is our next guest, Donald Bain. Donald, exactly what animals can you imitate?
Oh, Graham, I can imitate everything from mosquitoes to elephants.
Mosquitoes to elephants?
Yes, in other words, from... to...
That's a good way to encourage fan mail from the zoo. What type of animal are you called upon to do most, Donald?
Well, most of the time, I'm a dog.
Donald, you're just being hard on yourself. But seriously, do you play all kinds of dogs?
Yes, and in all kinds of moods, too. You see, Graham, in a script, I may be called upon to be a friendly dog like this. A suspicious dog like this. Or a vicious dog like this. That last is a type of a dog that's just not smart to argue with.
Yes, especially as his arguments have teeth in them. You certainly must have studied dogs in various moods.
Yes, Graham, and any person who really knows dogs can tell exactly how they feel by the sounds that they make. When a dog feels he is being left behind and wants to go along with his master, he'll sound like this. And when he feels like playing, he'll sound like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, if any of you have your dogs listening to the radio, will you please explain to them that they're not listening to a highly successful canine, but merely a reasonable facsimile. Don, what other animals are you called on to imitate?
Well, I have not been entirely unsuccessful as a chicken.
Chicken.
And I was Joan Bett's pet canary bird on a Lux show. I had quite a run of pigeons on Mr. District Attorney and others last winter. They sounded like this. And last winter, I was a pet monkey on Lorenzo Jones for quite a while. Then, not long ago, they made a jackass of me on a Radio Guild show.
What was the most difficult animal impersonation you ever had to do, Donald?
Well, I think it was the hardest role for me to play was a killer ape in one of the Shadow scripts. That was hard because whenever I do my imitations, I put my whole heart and soul into them, and it was terrific strain on my abdominal muscle.
Do you mind recreating that famous moment for us when you were the killer ape?
All right, here goes.
Well, you sure had me scared, Donald. That was mighty good. Several people in the back row here fainted, and a hysterical page boy had just been carried out in a straitjacket. And incidentally, if Gargantua is listening in, Donald was just fooling. Oddities in radio. Presenting odd, amusing little true stories that help make radio sometimes funny, sometimes exasperating, but always interesting. This week's oddity. A few years ago, the Believe It or Not program fell on Christmas Day. And Bob Ripley thought it would be a good idea to interview a man on the show whose actual name was Santa Claus. After a great deal of investigation, Bob actually discovered a man whose real name was Santa Claus. He was a preacher down in the Ozarks who had not only never been in New York, but he'd never been in any big city. Arrangements were made to put the preacher on the train, and he was told that when he reached New York, the very day before the broadcast, if somebody failed to meet him, he was to telephone the office of Doug Storer, Ripley's manager. Well, after the arrival of the train, the man who was to meet Santa Claus at the station phoned Storer.
Hello? Yes, this is Storer. What? Can't find him. You looked all over the station? Oh, well, that's okay. I gave him my phone number and told him if nobody picked him up to phone me here. It's 1 o'clock now. He ought to call any minute. You might as well come back to the office and wait for him here. 3 o'clock already. Good heavens. He should have phoned a couple of hours ago. Say, I wonder if anything's happened to him. Don, you sure you looked all over the station?
Yes, I have, Doug.
I'm starting to get worried. After all, this is the first time he's ever been in a big city. Say, this is getting awful.
You say, Doug, if he doesn't show up, we're going to be short one guest for tomorrow's program.
Yes, and it's too late to get another one now. I can't understand it. I'm going out to see our telephone operator. Say, Miss Evans, I haven't had a single phone call this afternoon. Hasn't anybody called me?
There hasn't been a single call, Mr. Storer. Tomorrow's Christmas, you know. Nobody's at their office.
Yes, but are you positive nobody's phoned?
Well, sure, I'm positive. Oh, some practical joker did phone and kept pestering me all afternoon.
A practical joker?
Yes, I'd lift the phone and say, Douglas Storer's office, who is this, please? And someone would say, this is Santa Claus. The last time he called, I got sore and said, well, I'm Cleopatra, and hung up.
Doug, did you ever find Santa Claus?
Yes, Graham. About 10 minutes later. 10 minutes later, he phoned once again, and this time asked if I was there and told him, and I said, where are you? And he said, I'm still down the Pennsylvania station. I said, for Pete's sake, stay where you are and don't move. I'll send a man right down to get you. And Graham, when the man got down there, he found Santa Claus had taken my words literally. He was still in the telephone booth where he had been all afternoon trying to get me. And you can bet your life, Graham, we didn't let him out of our sight until the next night when he appeared on the Believe It or Not program.
Thank you very much, Doug Storer. You did a great job acting the part of yourself. So long, Doug. Each week, we invite the listeners of Behind the Mic to write us questions about radio. And the 3 or 4 we consider to be of most general interest, we have answered on the air by the radio editor of some outstanding newspaper or magazine. Tonight's questions will be answered by E.L. Bragdon, radio editor of the New York Sun. Mr. Bragdon. Mr. Bragdon, Mr. Roger Neely of New Brunswick, New Jersey, has this question to ask. He writes, the other night I was listening to the Aldrich Family, and a few hours later I was fiddling around with my set and got a California station. Much to my surprise, I heard the Aldrich Family again, doing exactly the same program I had heard a few hours before. Was this a recording I listened to the second time?
No, Mr. Neely, it was not a recording. You heard what is known as a repeat broadcast. Many radio programs are broadcast from the East early in the evening. They repeat the same broadcast later because of the difference in time between the East and the West Coast. For instance, the Aldrich Family was broadcast at 8:30 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, which would be heard in California at 4:30 Pacific Coast Time. This would be too early in the afternoon to reach the same size audience as had listened to the program in the East. So the Aldrich Family repeats the same broadcast at 12:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time for the West Coast only, where it is heard at 8:30 Pacific Coast Time. This is a very common procedure.
Our second question is from Mr. Armand Elbaum of Wichita, Kansas. He writes, I hear the expression ad-libbing used on the air every once in a while. Then I have read that Fred Allen and Jack Benny are great ad-libbers. Will you please tell me exactly what is the meaning of ad-libbing?
Well, ad-libbing actually comes from the Latin ad libertum, which means at liberty. A radio performer or any performer is said to be ad-libbing when he does not follow the prepared script and speaks lines which presumably he had thought up on the spur of the moment. Fred Allen is said to be a great ad-libber because when a situation arises on a program that was not foreseen when the original script was written, he is expert at improvising funny lines to meet the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon, for answering all those questions. Behind the Mic presents the story behind the story behind the mic. Standing at the microphone is a pleasant, thick-set gentleman whose broadcasts by shortwave probably go to more countries than any commercial broadcast on the air. The gentleman, heard 3 times each week over NBC, is Captain Tim Healy, conductor of Captain Tim Healy's Stamped Club of the Air.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Captain Tim, exactly what was this broadcast you did? The one that had that strange result.
Well, Graham, back in 1935, I told the following spy story on the air. During the visit of the Kaiser to London in 1913, the British Intelligence Department assigned various officers to watch the visitors. Now, they were not to spy on them, you understand, Graham, but to guard them and keep them out of trouble. One night, shortly before midnight, a Secret Service officer who was disguised as a footman in Buckingham Palace rapped on the window to call the attention of another Secret Service officer outside.
What is it? General von Kleber is leaving the palace.
Righto. I'll keep an eye on him. The general drove off in a taxi, followed at not too great a distance by the officer, also in a taxi. The general's taxi twisted and turned through the streets as if, well, he was trying to shake off any possible pursuit. A maneuver which, incidentally, was not successful. Finally, about midnight, the general drove up before a barber's shop in North London. He got out of the taxi and, after looking about very carefully, knocked at the barber's door.
Dummkopf. Was ist los mit Ihnen? What's your idea of keeping me waiting here?
Oh, I'm very sorry, Herr General.
Well.
The intelligence officer hung around the outside of the barber shop, and it was an hour before the general emerged. The general was then driven back to Buckingham Palace. The intelligence officer thought this very strange, and he told his chief. And his chief thought it was rather strange. Upon investigations, it was discovered that the barber shop was owned by a man named Carl Ernst, a naturalized British subject. The chief assigned different officers every day to hang around the barber shop and see if there was anything in the barber's actions to arouse suspicion. One day, the chief himself was in the barber shop waiting to get shaved when the postman entered and threw a large brown envelope on the table.
Hello, Cole.
Oh, hello. Got something for me?
Yes, here's your money from Germany.
I wish it was. Goodbye.
Righto. I say, Barber, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Oh, but you're next.
Yes, but I must get a check cashed at the bank, and it's almost closing time. On my plate for me.
All right, I will.
I say there, postman. Postman, I want a word with you. Oh, blimey, I want to deliver these letters and,
Oh. Scotland Yard, eh?
Yes. Let's pop into this pub for half a moment.
All right.
Now, first, as a loyal British subject, I want you to keep your mouth shut about whatever I ask you.
You don't have to worry about me.
That big brown envelope you brought into the barber shop. Does the barber get letters like that often?
Depends on what you might call often. He gets one of these envelopes regularly. I should think about once a month.
Oh.
The chief then arranged with the post office department for the next of those letters to be delivered to him. And when it was delivered to him, the envelope was opened by a secret process known to military intelligence, opened in such a way that it could be closed without the tampering being detected. As soon as that letter was opened, they discovered 26 letters within that brown envelope. The letters seemed rather harmless enough, but when they were decoded...
Gentlemen, this one is addressed to a German agent in Portsmouth. They want to know the disposition of our fleet there. This one is to an agent in Manchester. They want to know about the production capacity of one of the munition factories. It is all undoubtedly clear that Carl Ernst is acting as a kind of spy post office. These letters are sent to him in this big envelope from Germany. Then he mails the individual letters himself, using English stamps, and the letters are then postmarked in England. And so the agents are not suspected of receiving mail from Germany. We'll just keep an eye on our Mr. Ernst.
British intelligence kept their eye on Mr. Ernst and on 26 German agents, so well that when the war was declared in 1914, they were all immediately clapped into jail, so that Germany was in complete darkness concerning the British troop and naval movements the few first months of the war.
What happened to Ernst and the other agents?
Well, Graham, of course, they paid the penalty for being spies. Now, Graham, what makes this story so strange is this. The day after I told this on the air, I received a telephone call from a gentleman who'd heard the broadcast, and he asked me to give him an interview. I did, and he told me a very strange story. He had been in complete ignorance as to what had happened to his grandfather, who had disappeared in England more than 20 years before, until he had heard my broadcast. His grandfather, Graham, had been Carl Ernst.
Thank you, Captain Tim Healy, for a very interesting and a mighty entertaining tale. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions about the inside of radio that you wish answered on the air, write a letter to us. Address it to Graham McNamee, Behind the Mic, National Broadcasting Company, New York City. As many questions as possible will be answered by mail, and the 3 or 4 questions we feel to be of most general interest will be answered on this program. Thank you. This is Graham McNamee speaking. Good afternoon, all.
Next Sunday, Behind the Mic will be heard at 5 minutes past 6 Eastern Standard Time, and thereafter at 5:30. This is the National Broadcasting Company.